Council members are in. We will commence the West Sacramento City Council Redevelopment Successor Agency and Financing Authority for the June 2nd meeting. And we will proceed with the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Commissioner Danny Therical. And I believe Danny is in at this point. Go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Therical, for doing the pledge tonight. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, members of the West Sacramento City Council and staff will participate in this meeting via Zoom. To reduce the spread of COVID-19, members of the public are asked to watch the meeting via live stream on the city's website or wave cable. We will have live public comment and we will continue to receive written comments, and all comments received by 6 p.m. will be provided to the City Council and posted on the website. To provide a live comment during the meeting, join the meeting using the Zoom meeting hyperlink or the phone number listed on the city's website. And I'll request public comment during item 1A prior to the first item on consent and after the staff presentation for any other item on the agenda. Once I've announced the public comment period, if you would like to make a comment, please do one of the following. If you are joining the meeting via Zoom, press the raise hand button. Or if you're joining the meeting by phone, press *9. And when it's your turn to comment, the clerk will call you by name or phone number and will unmute your microphone. Each person will be allowed 3 minutes. The clerk will notify you when you have 30 seconds remaining to wrap up your comments. And once your 3 minutes or your public comment has ended, you'll be muted again. You may also join by phone 1-669-900-9128. ID is 920-9564-2935, and the passcode is 004264. No actions were taken in closed session related to the Police Managers Association contract negotiation. The next item on the agenda is item 1A, which are presentations by the public on matters not included on the agenda, and council members are prohibited from discussion on any matter presented under this item. Madam Clerk, do we have anything in writing or live public comment requested?
Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public. We did not receive any written comments, but I have Maria Gralva on the line.
Okay.
Here you go, Maria. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I just want to provide some information on the significance of at-large elections from an article I found. Actually, the article is titled The Bias of At-Large Elections and How It Works. And so I'm just going to read a little excerpt. It's called The Oldest Trick in the Book. If you want to rig a local election, there's an easier way than stuffing a ballot, gerrymandering a district, or amassing a campaign war chest to scare off challengers. Have your city, county adopt winner-take-all at-large voting. Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg cited this method, at-large voting, along with racial gerrymandering as premier, a second-generation way to deny equal opportunity for minority voters and candidates. Congress has banned at-large voting for all federal elections. It's been discarded by most states. No voting methods has been subject to more litigation for its discriminatory impact on local elections. Yet, while the covers are off the discriminatory impact and intent of at-large voting, it persists in hundreds of local jurisdictions, including West Sac, I must comment. It's my understanding that at-large elections was implemented by the former mayor. And it's our two council members that keep holding it up. But anyway, the last paragraph is, by contrast, district elections make it easier for the voters and candidates. Voters are more likely to meet the candidate in person and have access to the representative after the election. And for candidates, the costs are less, more time is spent closer to home, and there is more chance to meet people they seek to represent. So that is the information that I wanted to bring to everyone, and so that the public could be aware that, again, we still have the issue of at-large elections and district elections in our city. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak.
Kelly Cox, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Sorry for, I'm here tonight to shed light on an ongoing and growing safety issue in my neighborhood. I live on 94 6th Street. This is 2 houses before a 90-degree turn where 6th Street becomes Cummins Way. There are 2 long stretches of road that lead up to the sharp turn that do not currently have any stop signs or speed bumps. There's also very little in the way of signs to warn cars of the sharp turn. Myself and my neighbors experience cars traveling well beyond the 25 mile an hour posted speed. And over the years, this has led to a lot of flattened fences, smashed parked cars and homes, and most recently, a fatality. But not only are these residents traumatized and fatigued that these incidents have happened to, they're out thousands of dollars in repairs and deductibles. As I've been talking to my neighbors and city officials over the last several weeks, I've come to see another problem. Some of the city officials of past and present have ignored the cries for help. I have spoken to some of the folks that have lived around here, for some of them for 3 generations, others for over 30 years. All have stories to tell of unsafe conditions, turned in complaints and regulations to the city, none resulting in action. And I would like to take a moment to note there too that we're limited as to what we can do as far as fencing in our front yard and what structures we're allowed to put up. And this is really the driving factor behind the intensity of our emails and our recent social media campaign. All of you are aware of I would assume, are aware of the insistence of the installation of speed bumps or the equivalent on both Cummins and 6th Street. We're open and welcome to additional traffic calming, such as measures such as stop signs, blinking lights, radar signs, increased police presence. However, none of these would be acceptable in lieu of speed bumps. I would like to note that I have immense gratitude and respect for those that serve our community. And I would also like to say thank you again to the mayor and to Dwayne Wilson, who came out to our neighborhood to meet and talk to myself and the neighbors about the concerns and the struggles related to this issue. We have started a petition, and so far we have 67 names. I've also collected, I'm on vacation, and so I don't have all my paperwork with me, but I have collected some handwritten, some just a standard form letter from my neighbors up 6th Street and down Cummins.
Thank you, Ms. Cox. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, that concludes our public comment.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next item is item 1B, council communications from our assignments. Are there any council communications? Yes, Councilmember Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Very quickly, I attended the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency meeting on May 20th, and was for the adoption of the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Biannual Administrative and Operations Budget and Capital Improvement for the year 2021 through 2022 and 2023 was adopted. And I also attended the Local Agency Formation Commission on May 27th. We adopted the final LAFCO budget for 2021 through 2022. There was a public hearing on approval of resolution 2021-04, adopting the Joint Powers Agency Service Report for the Yellow Habitat Conservancy. There was also an adoption of the Long Range Planning Calendar, the EO Activity Report for the period of April 19th, 2020 through May 21st of 2020. And finally, there was a CalAFCO legislative report, and it contained numerous bills. That is the end of my report.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma?
Yeah, I just wanted to report earlier tonight was the meeting of the Sacramento Yellowport District Commission and Board of Directors for the Yellowport Financing Corporation. Two items of note. One is we passed Resolution P21-1 approving the port budget for the fiscal year 21-22. The good news is the port is in a very positive financial condition right now. The port had a very good year and continues to make strides in its strategies towards kind of making sure that we had to make the investments necessary to kind of keep the port running in a good fashion. But it is a really good tale of the port where it was when I started in council to where it is today, where it is operating efficiently and fiscally prudently. So again, good news there. And then the budget did pass unanimously. Also, we approved unanimously an amendment to a 2008 solar power purchase agreement. This is an agreement the port signed initially when the Port District in 2008, when governance took over basically from West Sacramento, Yolo County, for where it bought its power. The city was able to negotiate and are looking towards negotiating a new agreement with them that was substantially lower costs of power coming out of the solar power purchase agreement that we currently have. So again, it's another stride towards what the port was originally kind of designed for, or the mission of the port was to sort of keep it a green port. And so again, this was a very good move that again, the commission unanimously agreed to. So that's all I have to report out.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. Councilmember Orozco?
Thank you. On May 26, 2021, I represented the city of West Sacramento with the New Hope Community Development Corporation and Yolo County Housing. In the New Hope Community Development Corporation meeting, we reviewed and approved a resolution authorizing New Hope CDC's interim executive director, Sandra Segrist, to be updated the signatory on the 1801 West Capitol Avenue Limited Partnership Agreement with Mercy Housing, which many of us know as our permanent supportive housing development, which is hopefully scheduled to open on or around September 2021. This is a long project that we have envisioned for several years now, and hopefully the transition from a project home key or project room key rather to house some of our most vulnerable populations in West Capitol Avenue and reduce the incidences and impacts of homelessness. We also received budget presentations from the Yolo County Housing Finance Director and Interim CEO. In addition, I attended the Sacramento Regional Sanitation District meeting on the same day, May 26th, in the morning. That day, we appointed Christoph Dobson as our district engineer, and he will take over the job of Prabhakar Samarapu, who has been doing this job for quite a long time and has been doing it very well. So it's bittersweet to lose Prabhakar, but at the same time to gain someone who has had a long history with regional SAN and someone who's very highly qualified to do the job well. At the same time, we also said goodbye to Joe Mastretti, who was our finance director, provided us with several decades of worth of budgets, many of which really did place regional SAN in a great spot. As many of you know, and I've said before, we've not had rate increases by regional SAN as a result of good fiscal responsible directors. And Joe Mastretti is very much responsible for at least the last decade of those decisions, with approval, of course, by the board of directors. And other than that, I just wanted to announce that the Majors Twins and AAA Giants of West Sac Little League won the championships yesterday. Well, at least the Giants did. And so kudos to all of the young players who went out there and swung those bats and played their hearts out. I'm really a proud city council member, but also proud mom, because I saw one of those little players day in and day out putting it all out there. And cheers to all of the young all-stars who were notified yesterday of their upcoming championships to come. So Tournament of Champions next, and kudos to West Sac Little League for running such an amazing effort on behalf of our kids after such a trying year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Orozco. And for my report, the Sacramento Valley Division League of Cities met on May 28th. And we had, like we would normally go and visit the jurisdiction, the city, in this case, the city of Placerville, but we are now having Zoom meetings. And the host city organized a presentation about their local transportation and broadband infrastructure, which I got to say is very impressive, and provided some guidance on a city comparable to the size of Placerville, but not so much, similar in certain ways on the infrastructure. I think that they have a ways to go. They need to establish an initiative on the ballot to approve getting some of this infrastructure paid for. And but they did share some of the intel they received in their research on broadband that we can probably tap and understand as we take a look at, the excellent news that we received from broadband funding update from Assemblymember Aguiar Curry, our champion, who secured $7 billion statewide to implement broadband, and that's only the state. We are also taking a look at federal funding as well, but sometimes that's a little harder to draw down. We also received a presentation on the American Recovery Plan Act and federal transportation infrastructure funding update by the National League of Cities, and this is taped in case you would like to take a look at the meeting and review the presentation. In addition, at the SACOG board meeting met on May 20th, we approved the submission fiscal year 2020-2021 regional program of projects for the Federal Transit Administration Section 5311. The funding is a net cost, county cost for Yolo County of about $278,000. I think Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma provided that update in the last meeting. In addition, we approved the SACOG Title VI program report and limited English proficiency plan. And I think Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma also referenced that we approved the downtown transit system integration study to move forward with the grant implementation activities that involve SACOG. It's a competitive transit and intercity rail grant program, which we were awarded in 2020 to a regional partnership, which included SACOG. We approved authorization for the executive director to issue requests for proposals for the Transportation Development Act triennial performance audits and negotiate awarding contracts with selected consultants. We also wished, Matt Carpenter, who's been with SACOG, many, many years, farewell in his retirement. I think some of you may know him. He's been such a great team player working with us, giving us guidance here in the city and many others in the region. We also adopted the final budget and overall work program for fiscal year 2021-2022, a very comprehensive budget program. In addition, I am a part of the SACOG's Race, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group, which is a very impressive team. And we met on May 28th. It's a combination of the board of directors, members of other jurisdictions, and nonprofit organizations. League of Cities president, our director Coleman is on there as well. And we had an opportunity with the guidance of our chair, Director Rick Jennings, he's Sacramento council member, and it was also vice chaired by Council Member Lucas Frericks. So we had a productive meeting, sharing our goals and history related to equity and inclusion. What's enlightening for us in preparation for this meeting was the race and ethnicity in a Sacramento report from 2000 to 2019, showing that the demographic shift is heading towards people of color as far as the growth in the population. And so, what you will see is the impact historically of people of color in the lack of, economic viability, that they are paid much lower wages, that they lack transportation, and they are significantly struggling as far as like auto ownership. They can't afford it. And in the pandemic, we also observed that they was the hardest hit population. And I think this diversity, equity and inclusion working group is, even though it's definitely prompted by what we have learned over the years, is the inequity among people of color. But this process has been started before, the impact of George Floyd and the protest. SACOG was noticing the growth in people of color and had the foresight with the leadership of Rick Jennings and Lucas Frericks to do this study and convene this group. And so it may seem that there's a nexus, but it actually was the foresight of SACOG, which I'm really proud to be a part of. And just transitioning over to legislation, wanted to share that we are looking pretty good in the Assembly and Senate package. We have taken a support position on AB 71. AB 71 is on the Assembly floor. However, components of AB 71 is included in the state budget. So there are some successes in that. In the Assembly and Senate, have giving it a lot of support. The coalition of supporters of over 300 organizations and local governments came in and put a lot of pressure on the legislature and the governor to take this into consideration. So there's $1 billion proposed to be ongoing in there that has yet to be approved by the governor. And the governor did propose funding for Project Homekey, but they carved it back a little bit to $1 billion for Project Homekey. And I think that's, an opportunity for us to expand Project Homekey and to consider that. And Councilmember Roscoe, I'm sure you'll be having the opportunity to have that, dialogue with our partners here in Yolo County. In addition to that, the broadband funding is quite welcome. And there are other items in the budget, which I'm sure we will get a report from our government relations representative, Doug Gross. With that concludes my report, and no appointments are.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, I just had one piece of.
One more thing. Sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Am I good?
Yes, you're good.
Thank you. So just one piece. I think maybe the city manager will comment on later, but it would just the announcement this week. I know you. I can't talk today. You retweeted it today, but
yes.
I will echo it. But certainly the announcement this past week from the president's budget that West Sacramento was included in the New Starts construction program, got that designation and got $17 million plus in funding. This was a huge, huge deal. And it's been really a phenomenal effort by our city staff for years to kind of get to this point, but mostly to Congresswoman Matsui, who has been so critical and she has been focused on trying to get all of the Sacramento region to get the proper flood protection money, but ours was particularly challenging. But miraculously, you're allowed whoop, whoop from West Sac last week.
Yes,
and it was mostly led by Greg Fabian, who's our flood program director. But good work to him and Aaron and all the team. I just can't say enough. This was a huge deal. I know all of you are aware of it. And I just want to make sure I took the opportunity to thank them, the city staff and everybody, because this was a huge, huge deal.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. I didn't want to steal Aaron's thunder. I know he was.
I have no problem with stealing his thunder.
Aaron, did you want to show up? And Greg, can you?
No, I won't have a report tonight, but that's okay.
I know, that's okay.
No, I just appreciate the kind words of it. Really, the credit on staff goes to Greg Fabian and the flood team and our partners in DC, and of course, more than anybody, as Councilmember Ledesma, or Vice Mayor Ledesma mentioned, Congressman Matsui and her team were just integral to not just securing this this spot in the proposal from the president's budget, but also staying with it for multiple years. Trying multiple angles. So yeah, we're very appreciative of that. So thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. And just to add, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma, I did reach out to the Congresswoman to thank her for her leadership, for her perseverance, never giving up on West Sacramento. I think, we were shocked when we saw that it was pulled, last year. And then just very happy. I know that the Congresswoman was trying to reinstate the funding, but she just is such a fighter for West Sacramento, and to see it in the president's budget is really unheard of. But to see it there is we were all cheering, to hear that wonderful news and excited to see that. When we still have to make sure we keep it in there and see it through all the way till the end. So that's something that I'm going to look at, preparing an advocacy plan to have all of us be engaged in advocacy work to protect that funding in the budget. And Holland and Knight has been an integral part of our involvement in Washington, D.C., and has been shepherding providing all the support that we've needed, as well as working closely with Greg, who's been, providing all the intelligence and the connection here. In addition, I wanted to share and thank the Congresswoman for her involvement in continuing to help us with AB 921. What happened is that the Senate and the Assembly have a 12-bill limit. And so as a result of that limit, we are working furiously to try to get that language in trailer bill. And as long as it has one policy hearing, there seems to be some ease in order to be able to put this in the trailer bill. Normally the budget process requires a hearing, but so we're keeping our fingers crossed. The Congresswoman wrote a letter on our behalf advocating that we get this language in the trailer bill. And, she's just so sensitive and such a, true advocate on our behalf in many levels. I just want to be able to, share with you that she's been a great fighter behind the scenes working with us. So with that, just, no more comments. We will move to item 1C. There are no appointments. Next is our consent agenda, items 2 through 12. And are there any requests to remove any item? Councilmember Alcala.
Thank you. I'd like to remove 6.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Roscoe.
Thank you. Item 12, please, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to pull item 11, please.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. And we will start off with item number 6, Councilmember Alcala. And I have questions about item number 6 as well. I'll let you go first.
Well, okay, it's a very simple request. I wanted to see the management letter that accompanied the audit, and I didn't see a copy of it. So I would like to get a copy of that.
Good evening. Absolutely, I can definitely follow up with a copy of the management letter for you all. I will also chime in. I did email that to you, and it's available on our website. We can send it again, but all of our 2020 annual report, the WSAFCA annual report, and the single audit with the management letter are all listed on our website.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, thank you. And in the CAFR, it's a very important document that shares, our financial report related documents associated with that, which are included in quite a few attachments, which I'm sure all of you have poured through these documents and are taking a look. And it's not the easiest to read. Roberta being our accountant, I'm going to be asking her some questions to provide some guidance for me here in this document. There is a balance sheet of government funds under the special revenue funds, and the fund balances are listed there. There's under the fund balances, there's non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. And so under the general fund, it says 24 million. Can you help me understand what that means?
Sure. I don't have it up in front of me, but if you're looking at the general fund, it provides the balance available in all funds that are combined with the general fund. So it would include our general fund, our one-time general fund, our reserve balances, the general reserve and the budget stabilization reserve, and it will also include our 4 sales tax measures. So because the Measure E, Measure K, Measure V, and Measure N were all adopted as general sales tax measures, they are considered general and discretionary. They do not have legal restrictions. However, they were adopted for the most part with either advisory measures or with policy frameworks that were adopted by council post adoption of the measures that align with the reasons that we put on the ballot as for what these measures would be spent for. So legally, they are not restricted. They are rolled into the general fund. However, they are restricted or committed for the purposes for which the tax measures were voted.
Thank you so much. And when it says unassigned, what does that mean?
I'm sorry, the unassigned will be the amounts that are, so the committed amounts, and I should probably let Becky do this because she—
There is committed for 13 million, and then there is assigned and unassigned, and assigned just has a bar, and then unassigned has for the 24 million.
Sure. The unassigned is going to be the available balances in all of those funds that are rolled together. I would make a guess, and I'll leave it to Becky, that the committed is likely a reserve that is committed for a specific purpose.
Okay. Very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And then there is the non-major governmental funds combining balance sheet for June 30th, 2020. And in there, let me take a look at fund balances. I'm looking at the various funds. There's the road fund, the public art fund, the public safety fund. And I'm curious to know under public safety, let's see, there's, under the road fund, we have balances of 1.8 million. And then what could that be used for?
Becky, are you, I'm trying to, do you know what page you're on?
110.
Sure, give me just a moment to pull it up and see. And Becky, if you're able to jump in because you're more focused on this, please feel free.
So road, just so you know, Roberta, the one she's referring to is the road fund, so Fund 201. So restricted for use. You'll be much more eloquent than me to describe what it's capable of being used for.
Sure. The road fund is made up of gas tax revenues that are brought in from the state. Those are eligible uses are road maintenance and related to road maintenance type activities.
Okay.
Just to expand on that, we do, this does sort of go with the budget that we're going to be talking about in a little bit, where a portion of those funds are actually proposed for programming for road projects.
A portion of that is?
I believe so. This is the ending balance as of the end of the fiscal year. So I know we have funding requests out of the road fund in the budget.
Sure. The annual report, which by the way, we do not use the shortened term that has been used in the past anymore. There was a release by GFOA because it is a derogatory term. It was a racial slur. So we're trying to avoid using that term. So in our annual report, this was as of June 30th, 2020. So any funds that were shown as available at the end of June 30, 2020, some of those would have been programmed in the current fiscal year towards either road maintenance activities or road maintenance type projects that can be funded by gas tax funds. I don't have that number on me currently, although if we look forward to the budget report, we can see what the beginning available balance is there. But yes, that was what was available at the end of June 30, 2020, and some of that would have been committed or used for road projects or road maintenance activities in this fiscal year.
Okay, very good. And then the public safety fund has, so you're saying that at June 20, it could be encumbered at that point. So this is just until June 2020.
Correct. The balance is as of June 30, 2020.
That is good to know. And so next is page 115. I have a question regarding the courtyard impact fees fund. And that it says under total assets, there's 959. Is there, under in this, I know this is only the CAFR, but just wanted to put a pin on this. Is there a possibility of using this for a loan agreement, for example, against this fund to pay for our courtyard? So I just want to put a pin on it. That's the question that I have.
Yeah, I can tell you that this fund actually does not have available fund balance. If you look at the bottom, it's got a negative fund balance of $4.5 million because there are outstanding loans against the
courtyard. Oh, there are outstanding loans already. Okay.
Correct, including some towards the courtyard project.
I see. So it's already been taken care of. Okay, good. Thank you so much. And I'm done with all my questions. Next, we will go to item 11. Let you, Councilmember Ledesma, present on this item.
Thank you. And I think we have a representative from the San Pedro Association.
Yes, Mr. Freitas is here. Dennis, can you, I don't know if you can open your screen or if I'm there.
Yeah, I see Dennis and I see Larry.
Dennis and who? Larry?
Yes.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, we have Dennis and another person, but I don't see them on my screen.
So, well, I'll go and get started, and hopefully either can be prepared because I'm glad they're both here, and I'm really pleased to present this proclamation tonight. Really, as I know our council knows, and everybody that tracks our council, while I'm
the recording has stopped. This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, well, thank you. As most, we're very proud of this council, and particularly because obviously I'm Mexican American, but I'm privileged to be married to my wife, Maria Simas, who is of Portuguese descent and actually grew up in the Bright neighborhood as a young woman and a participant. Her family was a participant in the San Pedro Association Park for many years. And so Larry and Dennis, I know you're both here. I've met you before, been at the park and for an occasional occasion. So this is a really great opportunity for the city to celebrate all that you have done for 100 years in our community, to be a part of our community, providing the rich cultural heritage that is what I know very well, the Portuguese community and those who built it. And so I want to thank you for being here and bringing this, for the City Council for bringing this to us. And we'll vote on it all together at the end, correct, Mayor? So, but I do want to read into the record the proclamation, if that's okay. So whereas in the early 1900s, the initial Portuguese immigrants from Madeira Islands, Portugal, settled in what was known as the Riverbank Township, then known as Bright, now West Sacramento. And whereas this small group paved the way for other Madeiran families to settle in the area, bringing with them their culture and religious traditions. And whereas in 1922, a young Catholic priest, Reverend Father Jose Jardim, arrived visiting Madeiran families and relatives, requesting donations for a monument built on the island dedicated to world peace. Whereas it was then that the first festa, see, I got my Portuguese accent, Larry. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, you got
it. Or Portuguese picnic, as many longtime residents of West Sacramento would call it, was held and modeled after celebrations in Madeira. Whereas the modest celebration slowly grew and became an official association, the San Pedro Association, in the 1940s. The San Pedro Association purchased land in Bright and developed a small park and a chapel, which was built by local Portuguese tradesmen and community volunteers. And whereas generations of West Sacramento residents, as well as those from surrounding communities, have participated in the religious processions and festivities at San Pedro Park since that time. And whereas in June 2011, the California State Assembly joined to declare the month of June to be the month of celebrating Portuguese national heritage. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of West Sacramento does hereby extend to the San Pedro Association our sincere congratulations on past achievements, making its cultural traditions upon its 100th anniversary celebration. So that's our proclamation. Congratulations to you. And to prove even more the heritage that is here, I hope you can see this, but this is a young queen from the San Pedro Association here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can see right in the middle.
Yeah.
Maria Simas was a queen, and my late father-in-law, Joe Simas, and Gloria Simas were involved in that community for a long time. So just thank you for all you've done. It's a wonderful culture that I have grown to love. Got to visit the Azores 2 years ago for the first time. And boy, just thank you so much for all you've done in our community.
Now you've got to visit Madeira Island.
That's on the list.
Hey, you know, the other thing I want to mention too is that not only this is our 100th anniversary year, and we're not able to celebrate it the way we'd like because of the pandemic. Even last year, we do have a drive-through. Larry could talk more about that. But we're in our 5th generation. Can you believe it? 5th generation involvement in the San Pedro Association. And this year, the younger people, I'm talking younger people, they're still 20s. You know, they're younger than I am. But we're in our 5th generation, so the beat goes on. So, and we have a young chef of the 5th generation is going to be doing the food that we're preparing for our drive-through. So it's great to see this, and we continue on. As the old people drop off, we have all the younger kids start again. Larry?
Muito obrigado. Okay, that's thank you very much. You know, it means a lot to everybody in our association, our board of directors. There's a lot of work that's put into maintaining the park. It's really become a community resource for people to use. And I appreciate the recognition. Our members appreciate the recognition. Come out and support our food drive-by. You can go out to sanpedrofesta.com and place your orders. And next year, big to do. 100 years, we're going to celebrate. We're going to put 3 years into one. Hope we don't get in too much trouble. And it's going to be a great at the end of June 25th, 26th, 2022. So thank you again very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Alcala?
I just wanted to also add, we used to look forward to the San Pedro Festival every year. I remember we were, wanting to see that fabulous parade where the queens, they'd have a mass at Holy Cross. That was tradition. And then the queens would march out there with beautiful floats and everything. And then we'd have like scores of us would go over to, enjoy the fabulous food over there. I remember we had a lot of Portuguese families that participated in that. I remember the De Souzas, the Cardozas, the Carvalhos, the Freitas, of course, and the Gonzaleses. So I'm just really thrilled that next year they're having their 100th anniversary. I remember Father Giancarlo Mittenberger and Father Antonio Medeiros would perform the masses there. And, you've just enriched West Sacramento so much, by continuing that. By the way, my son, Carlos, he's going to his final year at law school. His first birthday party was there at the Little San Pedro Park, and it was wonderful. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Councilmember Orozco.
Thank you. I'll keep my comments brief. I just want to say it's an honor to help Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma, partner with him on bringing this here tonight. I'm really looking forward to participating. It would be my first, so I have a lot to learn, but I am really excited to hear the stories from my colleagues and to hear about the long legacy and the contributions of the organization. Thank you so much for all that you've contributed to the West Sacramento community and for all the richness that you've brought to all of us.
And I also want to say thank you to Dennis and Larry and Tom, who have reached out and requested for this proclamation to be recognized and this resolution. It's been an honor for all of us to recognize your heritage, your long-standing heritage in our community. It's so beautiful. The culture, the traditions, just is so enriching. And it's, look, I'm looking forward to going back. I have visited, the San Pedro area, gone into the little chapel, I would think I was there, 2 years ago. And you had a celebration, and I've been back a couple of times with other events and celebrations that you've held there in the beautiful park area. Such a lovely place to be able to spend time with your family, and greatly appreciate all your contributions in so many ways. Just not with the traditions, but just your caring, engagement, and involvement in the community. And so, with that, I'm with partnering with my fellow council members and Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma, applaud you for all you've accomplished, and grateful for your involvement here in our community. So with that, looking forward to celebrating in person at some point, and looking forward to dropping by.
And Dennis and Larry, I'm going to need you to make a phone call because I don't think my wife is too happy I showed that picture of her. Figure that out later.
I got more. We got more.
We got more.
No, you do. I walked and I saw them.
Okay. And with that, we'll move to our next item number 12. And we have Councilmember Orozco doing a presentation on that. She has when I saw her backdrop today, I said, well, she definitely has to do the presentation. So with that, Councilmember Orozco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really appreciate the invitation by our mayor tonight. It gives me the greatest honor to have the opportunity to present. If you would all just indulge me for a few moments, because I'm not going to read the full proclamation, but I will remark a few things. Yesterday, President Biden issued a proclamation entitled "A Proclamation on Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Pride Month 2021." And I believe he said it best when he talked about the uprising at the Stonewall Inn in June 1969, which sparked the liberation movement that we now recognize as, a movement, an annual movement that lasts a month long. It started as a day, but that call to action essentially is now a conglomeration of different events and a whole entire month that continues to inspire us to live up to our nation's promise of equality, liberty, and justice. Pride is a time to recall the trials of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community that has endured so much, and to rejoice in the triumphs and trailblazing individuals who have fought and continue to fight for full equality. And this Pride Month, we recognize the valuable contributions of the LGBTQ individuals across the United States, and specifically in West Sacramento. And we affirm our commitment to standing in solidarity with LGBTQ Americans and their ongoing struggle against discrimination and injustice. And I will say that, I'm really proud of West Sacramento because year after year we do present this proclamation, and it just surprised me to learn of so many different municipalities, cities that choose not to. I find that remarkable. But I find I sit as a city council member very proud of my city as we look at all of the progress over the years and all of the work that we still have to do. I will say that as I call upon the people of our city to recognize the achievements of the LGBTQ community and celebrate the diversity of the American people, to wave their flags of pride high, I will say that, in the previous 22 years, we did have one of the biggest champions and an elected official who is probably the highest and long standing locally elected officials, Christopher Cabalden, who actually came out during a State of the City address, which we're going to have this upcoming Tuesday with Mayor Guerrero. And not only was that remarkable for him and for the people who were there at that meeting, I wasn't, but I did see the 2006 episode of Coming Out Stories, and it took a lot of bravery. And I'm sure it impacted so many more people who maybe had different thoughts about their position prior to seeing someone that they knew and loved come out publicly. I think the way that I would honor that legacy is just to raise 4 beautiful children ranging in the ages from 9 to 17 who have spent more than half of their lives as independent allies on their own accord. And I got to share it because earlier I said that the AAA Giants, they won the championships, and that makes me proud. I'm sure it does. My boy can, play baseball. But what makes me even more proud is that this week, my son, he likes rainbows, and he wore a rainbow mask to school, and he's in the 3rd grade. And he's a 9-year-old, and, that, cares about what his peers think. And a young classmate went up to him and told him that he didn't know, but he'll let him know. He'll let my son Mateo know that the rainbow stands for something that Mateo just didn't know about. And so Mateo said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "That means gay, and that gay is not a good thing." And I was kind of giving Mateo a heads up that perhaps maybe Mateo didn't know that. And Mateo stood strong in the presence of his male peers at a time when approval and acceptance and conformity, I think, are so concentrated. My son stood with a message back that said, it's okay. It's okay. It's good to be gay. It's not a bad or wrong or secretive thing. It's everything to the contrary. And my 9-year-old prepubescent son has no sexual identity that I know of. But what I love about it is that it's all good. And I am proud as a mother to stand with a child who stands strong in those convictions. So with that all said, and I know there are other folks who do want to speak, so I'll tie this up. I just want to commend my colleagues to stand with me and recognize June 2021 as LGBTQ Pride Month, and which is Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Pride Month. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Orozco. And I believe we have one speaker at this moment, Madam Clerk. And the speaker is Danny Thurical. I think he is waiting to speak.
Oh. Yeah, go ahead, Danny. I'll have Forrest speak later.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Hey, this is Forrest, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to get back into the swing of things here. This city is awesome when it comes to its open-mindedness and its ability to welcome folks from all walks of life. When I came here about 2013, I didn't realize that it was going to be so welcoming, especially with it being close to downtown. The thing is that being a bisexual male here, it was somewhat challenging because there's a stigma that comes with folks that are like myself. And I didn't have any of those negative interactions here, which made this feel like so much closer to home. And even my neighbors are just welcoming and everything. And so when it comes to affordable living and having the job opportunities that are available here and not have to worry about any of these say stigmas that come with being alternative lifestyles was just a breath of fresh air. And that's one of the reasons why I planted my roots and made this city the home of my dreams. And so the thing is that even though I am a transplant, I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon, because it's just not only the city of compassion, but it's also the city of welcoming here. And I mean, I can go on and on. I'm just thankful that I'm here with you folks tonight to share my return, my paying it back by saying thank you folks for being so welcoming.
Go ahead, Danny.
Man, there's so much I want to say. But I'll just start off by saying that one, I support this proclamation, and I thank all of you for being allies to the LGBT community. I have lived here for almost like 17 years now. Came here when I was in the second grade, and it was in grade school that I started to understand, my own sexuality, and it is absolutely something that is not taught in schools or really talked about even. And so, there is that connotation of it being a bad thing, as Councilmember Orozco said. It's something that we have to start teaching people about acceptance and understanding, and that there is nothing wrong. I remember it was, I believe, during high school or after high school, I was walking down the street, Tower Bridge Gateway, and with my significant other and holding hands, and it was a busy street. There were other people walking, but for some reason, a car drove by and threw ice at me. And I will never understand why they did it. But that moment has always struck fear to me moving forward, never knowing who else might do something, what else might happen. And even now, if I'm ever out with a significant other, I'm always cautious to find out, is it okay for me to even just hold their hand? I don't know, but I always have to have that thought in my hand before even doing it. And I know that if I wasn't gay, if I was straight and I was with, a girlfriend, that wouldn't happen. I wouldn't have those thoughts, but I do. Sorry, I get emotional because I love this. And I think this is probably the first time that I'll ever see the pride flag fly in my set. I love it. It may have gone up before, but this is probably the first that I'll ever see it, assuming that this proclamation passes, and it means a lot. To see that. I work at the subway right next to City Hall, so every time I walk to work, I'll be able to see it right there now. And I'm definitely going to take a picture of it tomorrow when I'm there. Post about this because it's just so amazing. And I just got done reading the news just the other day or today that, a same-sex couple across the river in the Kindred Soil Hotel, the Revival, a same-sex couple was harassed by a group of people for showing a public display of affection. And, it was like, to quote the article and to quote the couple, it's 2021, right? It shouldn't be happening. So I support this proclamation. I urge all of you to support it as well. Thank you for being allies. I want to give a quick shout out to Scott Hill, who I believe was the person who approached Mayor Guerrero about getting the flag to fly and starting this proclamation. And so I just wanted to give a quick shout out to him because I know he couldn't be here right now. I think he's away on a trip or something, but I just wanted to give a quick props to him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. And I just want to say I am so impressed with your courage to be here tonight, both you and Forrest, to share your personal experiences. It is, just as our past mayor did, it is threatening, it is scary. It is still really hard in today's world where we thought maybe we've made some progress, but we haven't. And we would like to make sure that, in flying the flag on our flag post, which is included in the proclamation at the request of Mr. Hill, when he approached me, I don't remember the flag since I've lived here ever being hoisted, the rainbow flag being hoisted. And, it takes a lot of courage to recognize that we need to do more on our part. And I'm looking at my sister cities doing so much. So for me, this is just the beginning to do what our part to recognize and appreciate the diversity we have in our community. And I just wanted to applaud you sharing your story and standing up for who you are. And don't hesitate to report back to us if anything happens. We're here to also protect you. AAPI is just up your alley as well, Danny. So we never know our constituents and people who live and work here, the impact this is having on them, that we want to make sure you're all feeling protected. Councilmember Alcala.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I was really so proud of my WSD board members when I was president, because we passed the first, I believe Danny can confirm this, it was the pass for the first Gay Pride Month resolution. And it was so important for us because we wanted all students to know the importance that the LGBTQ community, has contributed to our nation. We also wanted to be able to tell our students that we were so proud of them and we would be there also, to support them. Danny's a personal friend of mine. And Danny, we're so proud of you, for raising awareness, for being such an incredible leader. And thank you for everything you do to raise awareness. Thank you.
Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Danny, as well for stepping up tonight and expressing yourself and your pride, as you should, and as well, DeForest. This is an expression of our support. And as somebody stated earlier, that the city has for as long as I've been on council, we made every attempt to make sure this was a priority for us and the city. It is. It's part of who we are. And so I'm really proud that you're all taking this proclamation for what it is, which is really our stance and our statement that we are a tolerant, inclusive city, and that that we have your back. And I say that in the context because there's still more work to do. And I say that because, as you all aware, there's other cities across this nation who are, and even states that are writing city ordinances, or states that are banning certain types of activity from transgender kids or other. And that's not what we do here. And we're making our stand very clear about what we do. So yes, fly the flag. I was proud to host a brunch a couple of years ago at the barn, and it celebrated Pride. It was the first, I think, true Pride event. I was trying to keep it going, but I think called COVID hit. I hope to get back to that because that is important that we celebrate this as well as part of the festivities that traditionally go on in our region. So just really proud that we're able to take this step today and with this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. And with that, I'll accept a motion to approve items 2 through 13, which are on. I have one. Before we do that, we have received public comment for item number 6. Just want to check in to see if we have any other requests for public comment, Madam Clerk.
There are no speakers, Mayor.
No speakers, thank you. And the public comment for item number 6 and 15. Item 6 is city revenue and funding for safety and public support services and infrastructure. And for item 15, I'm scrolling through. It's on our website. So I believe we can talk about that after, because that's after. And with that, I will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move the item.
Thank you, Councilmember Orozco. And Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma seconds. And with that, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Alcala.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
And Mayor Guerrero.
Aye. Okay, next we will move to our time set agenda item number 14 under the city manager, which is our capital projects and transportation considering of a workshop on the West Sacramento Ability Action Plan. And Sarah is going to be presenting this item. Go ahead, Sarah.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Sarah Strand, Senior Transportation Planner with the Transportation and Mobility Division, and I'm very excited to be here before you this evening to present for your consideration the draft final Mobility Action Plan. As you know, this effort has been underway for a number of years, so I'll thank you in advance for your patience in just briefly reviewing where we've been with this project before I go over some of the newer content with you, and then open it up for our workshop for the evening. And again, the purpose of this workshop is to provide the City Council with an opportunity to provide additional feedback or direction on the draft map in advance of staff returning to request your consideration of adoption at a later date. So as you'll recall, this project, the Mobility Action Plan, was initiated in 2016 at the Council's direction, at which point staff was tasked with developing, at the time, what was being called a public transit strategy or public transportation strategy in response to a range of challenges that we were experiencing at the time, which are summarized on the slide. I'm sure you guys have seen this slide a number of times at this point. And the map concept was then first presented to the City Council in 2019 as a three-pronged approach, initially looking at where we would be able to streamline and enhance transit, explore the siting and design of multimodal mobility hubs, and developing some recommendations for how the city can start to really leverage new mobility and technology to achieve some more equitable transportation outcomes and improve the quality of life for our residents. As you know, the project was funded in 2018 through a Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant. And as we've noted in the past, YCTD did concurrently receive a grant to conduct a comprehensive operational analysis of the transit system. And so as a result, we had revised our scope to really focus more on just the mobility hubs and the emerging trends and technologies components of the map. But we've continued to work very closely and collaboratively with YCTD to ensure that the processes were, mutually reinforcing for each other and avoiding redundancy in our efforts. In 2019, we completed a competitive procurement. We've worked with WSP as our prime consultant on this project, with WRT Design as the sub-consultant. And Commission and City Council workshops were conducted in October of 2019, kicking off the project. At that time, we discussed things like the guiding goals and objectives of the map. And at that time, staff was directed by the City Council to really just make sure that the map was building from our existing local plans and goals, not reinventing the wheel, and really making sure that we're pushing to try to pull in some innovative concepts into this effort. The plan has since been completed over the course of the past 2 years with significant Commission, Council, cross-departmental staff, stakeholder, and community input, which I will review in a little bit more detail shortly. And at the beginning of this year, staff did present an initial look at the map to the City Council members through a workshop that was conducted just this past February. And at that time, we did solicit your feedback specifically around the proposed mobility hub sites and design criteria. At that time, our TMI Commission did not receive a presentation just due to the timing around appointments and meeting schedules. However, the same material has since been presented to and reviewed by the TMI commissioners through a workshop that was completed on May 24th. And we presented that in addition to all of the remaining report elements that we'll be sharing with you tonight. And I'll be relaying all commissioner comments for the council members at the conclusion of my presentation. And then additionally, the full map report, as well as its executive summary, were posted to our project webpage on May 5th. And those remained open for public review and comment through today, June 2nd. And this was announced through all of our social media and online platforms, and was also directly shared out to many of our key stakeholders, such as the Broderick Bright Community Action Network, our Chamber of Commerce, SACOG, and others. And then this slide should, again, look familiar from the last time I was here, but I did just want to offer a quick review of some of the highlights of what we covered, and particularly for the benefit of any members of the public who may be tuned in. So just very quickly, what exactly is the Mobility Action Plan? Per City Council direction, again, the map should be seen less as a standalone policy document and more as an implementation tool that's really helping us to achieve a variety of our existing local goals and plans. So things like our general plan, our age-friendly action plan, which this is directly an implementation action for. And very importantly, a key policy framework for this mobility action plan has been derived from the Joint Mayors' Commission on Climate Change, which this was an effort that was developed concurrent to the project kickoff for the map. And so it really received direct input and guidance from West Sacramento staff, elected leaders, alongside other industry experts and advocates from across our region. And ultimately, the map really both shaped and has been shaped by the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change strategies and tactics. So there's been a very iterative relationship between these efforts. And as you all know, the Climate Commission report sets really ambitious goals with the overall intent to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. More specifically, there are the 3 mobility goals from the Climate Commission, which focus on these key strategies to focus or to achieve the goals, which is broken out by active transportation, transit and shared mobility, and zero emission vehicles. And these goals really served as guideposts for the map. And it's been what's really enabled the city to use the map as an implementation tool, really rather than reinventing the wheel as we were directed by council. And as you'll also see in the draft plan and the recommended actions in that report, the map directly incorporates these goals into its objectives. And similarly, the recommendations from the map seek to align with and support some of the recommendations that are coming out of YCTD's YOLO Go effort, which, among other things, is proposing to double the frequency of Route 42, making airport access much more convenient for West Sacramentans. And we'll look at reducing some of our poor performing lower ridership bus routes in the lower density areas where other mobility options like our Via On-Demand rideshare program will likely serve as a much more convenient connector to get people to those higher quality fixed route services. And then again, the map should really be considered a living document, one that should be revisited periodically to ensure that our hub sites are still aligned as our development and transportation patterns continue to evolve over time, especially considering just how rapidly the transportation industry has proven to evolve over the past decade. And then lastly, the map is really all about growing choices for residents, making it easy to fluidly transition between modes and get people where they need to go. So for that reason, the map does not focus on the needs or demands of private vehicle use as much, things like potholes or roadway construction, but instead it really is focused on growing those other sustainable options and making sure that the supportive infrastructure is available to connect residents and visitors for their daily needs. So, things like bike lanes, sidewalks, safety measures, EV charging, signage, or technology that can make, catching the bus or planning your trip out a lot easier. Ultimately, the draft final mobility action plan presented to you this evening has 3 key outcomes, including 6 actionable strategies to implement the city's smart transportation goals, the Mobility Hub Toolbox, which you've already been made pretty familiar with, and the completion of a smart mobility and technology assessment. As previously noted, the City Council did conduct a workshop on February 17th related to the Mobility Hub Toolbox, which again, that developed the methodology, design criteria, and the proposed locations for mobility hubs at varying scales. And I'm just going to do a really quick review and just kind of circle back on some of the comments that were received at that time. So as you'll recall, the mobility hubs were broken out into 4 typologies based primarily on scale and their function as either a predominant origin or destination. And per City Council feedback, we did adjust the naming conventions to relate more to the scale and geography of the hub. So we transitioned from what was previously the primary, secondary, tertiary designations over to the regional, local, neighborhood, and micro-mobility designations that are shown on your screen. And as a reminder, these hubs are also broken out by near-term and long-term site recommendations. And the team sought to balance the coverage in the hub network with kind of coverage across the whole city versus concentration in equity areas where folks are really much more reliant on things like transit and walking and biking. So you'll be able to see that in our map of the hub network, that there is a slightly higher concentration of hubs located in those neighborhoods where the reliance on alternative modes is much higher. But we still maintain some hubs, albeit a smaller concentration, at some strategic locations in the South to really encourage mode shift in those places where people are still predominantly relying on driving alone as their main mode of transportation. And again, I'm not going to dive back into this in great detail, but I did just want to quickly refresh your memories on the amenity matrix that does accompany those mobility hub typologies. Again, this just provides the programming guidelines. It identifies what are those key components that should go at a mobility hub based on each scale. And these are just guidelines. As we shift into implementation and get on the ground level, each hub location will likely present some different constraints that we'll have to consider in the actual design. And not to mention, making sure that we actually do the outreach to get that community feedback and make sure we're really deeply understanding their actual mobility needs and design preferences. But this really, establishes a solid baseline for what are those key ingredients to make a hub successful. And, wrapping it all up, with all of this combined, we did identify 44 recommended mobility hub locations across the 4 typologies. Quick reminders that the regional hubs are the largest scale, and as you can see, there are fewer of them for that reason. They have a much larger regional catchment area. And then the smallest in scale are our micro mobility nodes, which you'll see a much larger number of given their much smaller catchment area and reach. On this map, you'll also notice that we added a hub at the Stillwater business area per City Council direction. And that hub received a long-term local scale mobility hub designation due to the presence of existing local YOLO bus service, which will be maintained in the area with the YOLO Go recommendations, as well as the potential for partnering with some of the businesses out there to expand EV charging and car share access. Micro-mobility could be explored at this location in the long term, but staff would actually strongly recommend that we explore some additional safety measures along Reed Avenue and the Harbor Avenue connection areas, especially at that freeway intersection, before we looked at introducing additional micro-mobility offerings in that area. So since completing the work on the Mobility Hub toolbox and those recommendations and incorporating City Council's feedback, the remaining elements of the map that have also been completed, which are the primary focus of this evening's workshop, include the remaining outreach events that we wrapped up, the smart mobility and technology assessment, and the final map strategies and recommended actions. As we've previously shared, there were multiple community outreach events held, including a kickoff event back in July 2020. We held Mobility Hub focus groups that included participation from River City High School's Green Tech students, as well as members of the public, where we conducted some design charrettes of a mobility hub. And a survey was also deployed from August to October that solicited more than 300 residents' feedback on transportation choices, barriers to choosing various sustainable modes more often, that type of thing. And then there were key themes that emerged across these efforts. Many residents, again, emphasized a really strong desire for having safe walking and biking infrastructure that people of all ages and abilities can use for short trips. There was a consistent emphasis on needing to ensure, seniors and young children are accommodated on our bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And we also heard demand for wider availability of bike share and scooter share, especially in the south half of the city where they have just tended to be less available. And through the design charrettes of the Mobility Hub with the focus groups, we also received some pretty consistent feedback across 4 different focus groups that they all expressed interest in amenities such as protected bike lanes, shaded seating. Shade was a really important component of all the mobility hubs, access to Wi-Fi, as well as concepts around having kiosks that provide a variety of information that came up in our focus groups, things like real-time transit info or other helpful info. And it was noted by some participants that it would ideally be available with translation services, a kiosk that you could walk up to and access this information in a variety of languages at these key mobility hub locations. So since then, we did share out the map recommendations through a virtual town hall, which received a generally positive reception by the small group of attendees that we had with, there was pretty small number of follow-up questions. But we've also gone ahead and we've presented to a number of key stakeholder groups, including the local AARP chapter and their volunteers, which includes some members of our BB-CAN organization locally, as well as the SAC Region Plug-in Electric Vehicle Collaborative. And we've also notified the community and other key stakeholders, such as the Chamber of Commerce, Walk Sacramento, SACOG, others, about the available review period that, as I mentioned, just closed today. So also included in the draft final map are a number of different considerations that are set forth in regard to new mobility and technology, and which were also used to help inform the overarching action items and strategy recommendations from the map. So there's a summary of these key considerations included on pages 12 to 16 of your attachment 1, which is the executive summary, or were discussed in detail, pages 86 through 95 of the full report, which is attachment 2 of your report. And I'm not going to go into all of them in detail because we would be here for an hour and a half. But this task really dug in to assess where's the city at currently in relation to some key categories. So looking at micromobility, ride share, car share, electrified vehicles, which includes, taking a look at hydrogen refueling infrastructure, ride hailing. So unlike VIA, looking at, things like Uber and Lyft and the traditional TNC model, vehicle automation, as well as connected vehicles and infrastructure technologies, and mobility as a service apps, which if you're not familiar with MOS, this is a concept that, eventually one day we can have one app that would allow users to plan, book, and pay for trips across multiple platforms through a single app. So you could book and ride your jump bike and hop on the YOLO bus all in one app. So as you'll see in your attachment 1 executive summary or attachment 2, which contains the full draft of the plan, the map proposes these 6 key strategies that are set forth for your consideration this evening, alongside, again, that mobility hub toolbox and the smart mobility and technology considerations. And the 6 strategies identified in the map are as follows: to create an integrated network of mobility hubs at key locations, connecting residents to transit stops and activity centers while prioritizing historically under-resourced and transit-dependent communities. Prioritize projects that enhance safety for non-vehicular road users and create more space for walking and rolling in the public right-of-way. Provide convenient and accessible transit and shared mobility options that connect to local and regional destinations. Encourage adoption of and ensure equitable access to zero-emission vehicles and alternative transportation options. Plan for supportive infrastructure and develop tools to prepare for emerging technologies and ensure successful and equitable implementation of transportation strategies. And last but not least, advance supportive policy frameworks that will reinforce the city's goals and values and guide future transportation investments with a focus on social equity. And I'll just note the 6th strategy listed here is especially focused on focusing on social equity, but the team did make an effort to ensure that equity was threaded throughout all of these strategies as a really important element of this plan. So for each strategy, there's a set of recommended action items included in the map that are intended to help the city advance a smart, sustainable transportation system. And due to the just volume of recommendations alone, I'm not going to be reading them all off to you at this time. However, I did just select one to serve as an illustration of what's included on pages 96 through 110 of your full report in attachment 2. And I'll also just ask you to please note the strategies and listed actions are not currently in any particular rank or order of prioritization. They are all considered as important to advancing this plan. However, if the council members have feedback on key priorities for implementation, we would welcome those for consideration as we do transition into the implementation phase. So this particular example shown is strategy 5, which is related to encouraging and ensuring equitable access to zero emission vehicles and alternative transportation options. And as you can see, this section provides a review of where the city's at with this strategy currently. So it talks about the efforts that we've been making through our plug-in partnership to get EV charging into the ground and that kind of thing. And then it also has recommended actions to pursue to continue making progress on this front. And so there's a varying number of recommended actions for each strategy, but you'll notice that each action item that is reinforcing the goals and strategies that are set forth by the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change are specifically highlighted with an MC icon beside them. So this is just helping to make it really clear how this plan is helping to implement and achieve those goals alongside the city's forthcoming climate action plan, ensuring that these are really truly reinforcing each other. The recommendations range in scope from things like capital projects, such as just installing more EV chargers throughout the city, to additional information gathering through plans or studies. For example, getting more information just to better understand what our electrical capacity is going to look like into the future. As well as policy considerations. So looking at our building standards to ensure that new developments are planning for electrification, or as just a different example that's described in strategy 6 of the map, which is more focused on advancing social equity, to develop a CIP prioritization framework that centers social equity in the project evaluation, selection, and phasing process by tying project prioritization and advancement directly to key social equity performance metrics. And then additionally, each strategy is accompanied by a section on funding and partnership opportunities, as well as a review of consistency with those established city goals. So this, again, it just helps align each strategy with the most appropriate funding opportunities, and then also helps to demonstrate that the map is where and how it is helping to serve as an implementation tool, reinforcing our existing policy documents, such as our general plan. In regard to implementation, the city has already been really busy getting to work in this arena alongside the map's development. So we haven't waited to finish the plan to get to work. We've really just kept our foot on the gas pedal. So we're very well poised to proceed with many of the top action items from the plan. As I've mentioned a number of times already, and as many of you are already familiar with, YCTD, their YOLO Go recommendations were adopted by the YCTD board. And so we'll be working really closely with them on implementation, especially on some key hub locations where operational details had yet to be worked out for the YOLO Go. So we'll want to make sure that they're routing the buses to the stops where we've cited some hubs in some key locations, especially in the south half of the city. Our West Sacramento on-demand rideshare program continues to operate. And some of the key recommendations around that include digging a little deeper to explore how we can transition from things like our temporary free transfer to YOLO bus program to a more permanent relationship for making it easier for people to transfer to and from the bus from the rideshare program. Our micromobility permitting program, which the City Council recently adopted an update to, created our fee forgiveness program, which now gives the city staff leverage to actually ask micromobility operators to deploy devices at these key hub locations, which sometimes may be not congruent with where they might naturally deploy devices. Our gig car share program has continued to expand in partnership with gig, and staff was preemptive in working with them to make sure that some of those expansion locations were consistent with where hubs would be sited. So for example, at Joey Lopes Park, which is one of our only 2 regional hubs that we're hoping to get going here. And then wayfinding signage, something that may be easy to overlook, but is actually a really critical component to tying this all together and making it easy for people to navigate to and from hubs. We have combined funding from both SACOG's TDM Innovation Grant Program and the Yellow Solano Air Quality Management District that will be supporting staff's efforts to get some wayfinding in the ground this year. And those sightings will be consistent with the key mobility hub locations. Additionally, we've had a really great year for the support of bike ped infrastructure, those connective tissues that are going to make it possible for people to get to and from hubs. We've secured funding for the Sycamore Trail Phase 2 and 3, as well as some planning funding to proceed with a complete streets plan for Sacramento Avenue. And we are waiting to hear back from Caltrans on an additional grant that we're hoping to receive to complete, which we've titled the Sidewalks and Transportation Equity Program, or STEP, which would allow us to take a much closer look, doing a comprehensive assessment of our sidewalks, our pedestrian network. We have a really excellent bike ped trails master plan that establishes a great plan for a low stress bicycle network, but there is some room for improvement in looking at understanding where the gaps are in our current sidewalk network and identifying cohesive projects that we can really package up, go after grant funding, and start to get implemented on the ground, especially in our social equity areas where people are more reliant on walking for their day-to-day needs. And then, of course, our plug-in partnership. As you've heard, we received a little over $2.5 million from the SACOG Green Region Grant Program. And we just released an RFP for the design of the first phase of our plug-in partnership, which is looking at 8 different city-owned sites across the whole city to install a combination of level 2 and DC fast chargers for public use. And we'll hope to have those installed by the end of the year before proceeding into phase 2 and 3 of that, which is really trying to reach out more to work with private partners, private property owners, multifamily residential units, as well as our freight stakeholders, and working with them to say, hey, is there infrastructure we can put in the ground or other ways we can partner to help you electrify your fleets sooner? And then last but not least, the West Sacramento Climate Action Plan, our community development department team has been making strides on the CAP, and we've been ensuring that these plans are working hand in hand together, and that the map is really falling under the umbrella of the CAP to make sure it's helping to enforce everything that's going into that work. So, as previously noted, the draft map has been open for public comment since early May, and it did just close today. Additionally, staff conducted a very detailed and robust workshop with the TMI Commission on May 24th. Given just the number of new commissioners who hadn't seen any element of the map before, we were really careful to review all aspects of the plan with the commissioners, and we received a unanimous recommendation of adoption to relay to the City Council alongside the following comments. We heard very strong support for prioritizing the implementation of mobility hubs in social equity areas first. The commissioners, multiple commissioners expressed appreciation for the consideration of shade at hubs and transit stops, and emphasized the importance of shade as well as a tree canopy for active transportation, especially in light of global warming and climate change. The commissioners encouraged staff to continue partnering with CARB and seeking partnerships with private industry to support freight electrification, which is consistent with much of the work of our plug-in partnership. They highlighted the continued build out of the broadband network as a critical priority to support as supportive infrastructure that would enable equitable access to all of these various modes that we're putting on the ground. Commissioners expressed concerns about sidewalk maintenance being outpaced by gap closures and new sidewalk construction, and did request that staff is mindful to ensure that we have a strong maintenance plan for sidewalks moving forward. The map is probably not the best vehicle to address that in. However, pending word from Caltrans on our sidewalks and transportation equity program that we've requested funding for, that will probably be an excellent opportunity to dig in on that in more detail. And then last but not least, the commissioners emphasized the importance of hubs at the city's edge for regional connectivity. So things like as bridges come online, connecting to the rail yards area, and since this is a living document, making sure that we update it in a timely manner alongside those and make sure we site hubs as needed, but also things like the park and ride lot that is identified as a hub, located down at the west end of West Capitol, and commissioners highlighting that as a very good opportunity for things like EV park and ride or biking to transit opportunities for Davis commuters. Aside from that, very little additional feedback has been received from stakeholders in the public outside of what we've already summarized through the outreach and engagement efforts. However, we did receive a few comments during the public review period, including requests to ensure that there's just accommodations for older adults included in the mobility hub designs when implemented. So making sure there's adequate shade, benches, hydration stations, that type of thing. There were inquiries from a couple of residents just about plans to close sidewalk gaps along Sacramento Avenue. This has been a consistent question we've gotten. And then last but not least, just folks who are interested about the timing of hubs in their neighborhoods where they live, who just were excited to see these come into their neighborhoods. So at this time, I would like to transition to the workshop component of this item. I've listed, oh, I'm sorry, I'm skipping a step. In terms of next steps, pending your feedback this evening, and unless otherwise directed, our staff's intention is to return to request your consideration of adoption at the following City Council meeting on the consent agenda, which would of course incorporate any revisions or modifications that you direct us to make at this time. And then following adoption, the next step would be for staff to really begin further strategizing on what are those key priority action items for implementation, which would of course be brought back for additional commission and city council input alongside discussions of funding. On that note, staff would also then begin developing a more detailed funding and grant acquisition strategy to match up some of these key action items with the most appropriate grant programs for the upcoming cycles. And lastly, staff would of course continue to collaborate with our regional partners who are going to be very critical to the success of the Mobility Action Plan. So that includes YCTD, our micromobility operators, VIA, Gig Car Share, SACOG, others. So much of a mobility hub in particular is really just about getting the service providers on board. And then there is, sort of meat on the bones that the city can fill in terms of looking to provide some additional amenities or fixtures. But working with those partners to make sure that we're all coordinating is going to be really critical to getting these all rolled out. So that, and also just with an adopted plan in hand, coordination with these external agencies and partners is going to be a lot easier and more focused. So, working with YCTD to ensure that those YOLO Go recommendations are implemented in a way that really work with our hub locations. And again, proceeding to start implementing our fee incentive program with our micromobility operators. So now I would like to transition to the workshop component of our item here tonight. And I've just listed out a few prompting questions for the city council members to consider here. Just general comments, questions, or feedback. If there are any major policy considerations that you feel may be missing, we would definitely want to hear that at this time before we bring it back for your consideration of adoption. And last but not least, if you do feel very strongly about providing direction on things that you think should be absolutely top priority action items for implementation, we would welcome that feedback at this time so that we can kind of get a jump on coordinating for those items. So with that, I will thank you for your time. And the requested action this evening is that the City Council just provide feedback and direction on the draft plan for incorporation in advance of requesting City Council's consideration of adoption at a later date. This concludes my presentation, and I'll pass it back to Mayor Guerrero to open the City Council workshop.
Thank you, Sarah. Bring it back to Council for discussion, and then after that, our questions to staff, and then we'll open it up for public comment and then close it and bring it back to staff for final comments. So I see Council Member Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Sarah, thank you. and everyone for this wonderful presentation. And the plan looks great, but I do have a few questions, just some follow-up. First, I want to say thank you for bringing the social equity area up. I think that's something that's been on all our minds. We want to make certain that, everyone has the access, to these hubs. And I also love the broadband, network that is being factored into this presentation. So I do have some questions. Tell me the difference between a main hub and a regional hub. Well, I mean, a regional hub, I'm sorry. What was the other term? Okay, guys. Tell me the difference between the hubs.
Yeah. So
there we go. Yeah, the regional hub and the local hub. There we go.
Yeah, I'm happy to review. I didn't want to go over anything in too much redundancy from our last workshop, but I'm happy to go over it. So the regional hub is the most robustly programmed large regional hub. The requirement of regional hub is that it has regional transit connections. So we only have one regional connection currently serving West Sacramento, which is our Route 42 yellow bus.
Right.
In the future, if we do have any expansion of light rail or other type of high quality, high capacity transit, then that could be added in as additional hubs. And so what's currently programmed in the plan,
right,
is that our existing community center, which is already a natural hub, it is our transit center. It has micromobility offerings. It has via rideshare access, all of these things. And Joey Lopes Park, which is also really queued up to already serve as a regional hub. It has the Route 42 serving it. It has micromobility stationed there.
Right.
It has car share stationed there. We're looking at putting EV charging stations in at that site. And then, of course, it serves as a very important connection in our low stress bike ped network with the expansion of Sycamore Trail that's going to drop right down into it, as well as all of the improvements along West Capitol Avenue, in addition to the land use component of a regional hub. So regional hubs tend to be more of destinations in and of themselves. They're places that have high activity centers where folks are trying to get to. So, things like our community center that has the community college, the library, city hall, learning ladder, the active aging center, all clustered together. The next scale down would be a local hub.
Yeah, those are the two I'm really concerned with.
Okay. Yes, the next scale down would be a local hub. And it's really just a slight step down from a regional in that it only has local connections with transit, but it would still maintain many of the same types of programming. And I'll actually just click over here to our amenity matrix so you can see. The amenity matrix in the report lists out which amenities are recommended as vital. So our regional hubs, everything is listed as vital here. So having Wi-Fi, wayfinding signage, bus shelters, car share. At the local level, some of these things become a little bit more flexible. So car share becomes a little bit more context sensitive. It's recommended, but not vital. Having bus shelters, or even having bus stops, transit connection, fare kiosks, whether there's real-time information signage, that type of thing. And as you go down in scale, those shrink in the programming in terms of the menu of mode options, but they also shrink in their catchment area in that way. So for instance, a micromobility hub can be as simple as having bike share and scooter share drop down in a neighborhood, which isn't going to have the same distance reach for somebody who might be able to hop on a regional bus, may be able to help people close that first last mile gap to reach a high quality fixed route bus so that they can get on their trip.
Yeah, I guess one of my concerns is Sacramento Avenue to me is an area that I know I think you designated that not as a regional, but as a local hub. And I keep thinking of all the 400 new units that are going in, on the north side. And rather than have, I know you guys are trying to encourage, it's one of the things you mentioned, you're trying to encourage more environmentally friendly, means of transportation. And I was just thinking the South area, you know, a lot of the folks actually commute in. They have jobs in the Bay Area. There's more cars out there also because, you know, it's a higher, you know, income level, you know, for most families out there as opposed to the North. So one of my concerns is that, you know, we want to connect the North. And I know you said it's a living, breathing type of, you know, what did you use, Chairman? What like program that we're going to
living document, yeah.
Living document, right? Just like the Constitution, right? Anyway, and I guess that's one of the concerns that I had, that, you know, we do have a huge majority of the population over here, and they have less access really to transportation. So I couldn't understand why we couldn't make one of these on Sacramento Avenue, this area, one of the regional hubs, you know, invest some money in there to connect.
Yeah. And that's a really great point. And I think I'll just point out really quickly, for that reason, you'll notice that there is a much higher concentration of hubs of all typologies in the north half of the city. And should we do the adequate coordination and investment with YCTD to introduce regional connection of transit along Sacramento Avenue, then that would absolutely allow us to create a regional hub. But the way that the map is currently designed is that a regional designation requires a regional transit connection. And currently there is no bus or transit service that reaches Sacramento Avenue that provides a regional connection. We only have Route 40, 41, the only local serving transit connections in that area.
And one of my big concerns, not just mine, the whole council agrees. You know, we've seen our kids in the north sort of, you know, not have the same access to the wonderful pools that we have, you know, at the community center over there. I know we have a bus, but that only goes once a day. There should definitely be something, and this maybe should be, I don't know if it's part of this conversation, another conversation. You know, during the summer we've been having these hideous heat waves, you know, and to not have our kids, you know, whose parents are also paying taxes, you know, and, you know, here in West Sacramento, have access. So that's one of the considerations I hope, you know, as this living, breathing document develops, that is given, you know, a very, generous consideration. And then my next question was, you had 4 focus groups. Did you get a lot of people from the north? Were they volunteers? Did they call you guys? Was there outreach done? How did we get these? I saw the group that you gave. These are great groups, but they're all also usually very active community groups that, you know, give a lot of input. And I guess my concern is there are a lot of folks that could really provide us with a lot of eye-opening insight. Do we normally go out there and try and, you know, get a more diverse group? And how many were from the north? If you just ballpark figure.
Yeah, I don't have hard numbers off the top of my head. We didn't collect people's addresses from the focus groups. We did have a general conversation about what part of town are you from, and we have representation from folks from the north, absolutely. We've also been able to pull quite a bit of information from a separate concurrent effort that we have going on through our Harvard Bloomberg Innovation Bootcamp training that I know our Mayor Guerrero is very familiar with. We've been doing a lot more kind of in-depth interviewing, and it's been very focused in that area for these reasons. And so I've been part of that group and been able to pull quite a bit out of that. But as I talked about in our last workshop, you know, we've done our best in a very challenging time to do community engagement. Our national community outreach plan included conducting a lot more in-person outreach and completing 10 pop-up workshops in the neighborhoods throughout the city to go to where the people are instead of trying to get them to come to us. Our first community workshop was planned for March 2020. So obviously everything got very upended for our community outreach, and we had to pivot very hard. You know,
it's hard right now with COVID and people being, so I appreciate that.
We've done our best to reach folks, but I won't say that it's been the best turnouts that we've had, because it's been an incredibly challenging year to reach folks and get them on virtual platforms and make sure that we're hearing from everyone that we need to hear. So I think for that reason, you know, this being a living document gives us that time in the implementation phase to make sure that we're getting on the ground in those communities before putting any infrastructure on the ground as well.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. my big thing is I want to make certain, but you do have the component of social equity access. I thank you very much for being very cognizant of that. But Sacramento Avenue, I just think, we need to invest some there. And it's, but like I said, 400 units is considerable. And if we really want to, be, aware of what, climate change, all this going on, that would be really potentially very strategic move, and hopefully, encourage more people, to use different types of transportation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, I'll open it up for public comment. I think we had one request to speak.
Yes, we do. Go ahead, Danny.
Hi, I just wanted to quickly thank Sarah Strand for all the work, and as well as city staff. I just really appreciate the kind of holistic view of transportation that has been put into the mobility action plan. It's not just about getting from A to B, it's the waiting for the bus. So shade absolutely is important, benches, and the way that, the bus stops are designed to give access to, those who are maybe physically disabled or older, need a sit. So I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thurgood. Are there any other requests to speak, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Maria Grijalva, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I just want you to please be conscientious when you're making your considerations of the folks that want to get out to the swimming pool in the south area, that live in the north area, and that do not have a way to pay for that on a daily basis. On a daily basis, it does add up. And I wish that you'd please consider that. It's very, very important. And so please keep that in mind. There's a lot of people in the north area, especially moms that have teens, and they need to keep their teenagers busy. And it would be really convenient if they had a way to transport them on free to the Parks and Rec swimming pool. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other speakers, Mayor.
Thank you. And we'll close the public comment and bring it back to Council. Council Member Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you. And I know it's getting late, and but I did want to just make a few comments, Sarah. And first, as always, thorough, thank you, comprehensive view of kind of, we made a lot of progress on, just what started as an image and an idea or instinct or need we identified, a few years ago, has emerged as a 130-page document outlining kind of strategies and where we can go. And I kind of want to take that moment to think about, this is about, the whole thing is about equity in my mind. That my kind of personal light bulb moment over the past few years has been being on the Yellow Bus board, and then working through with you, Sarah, and the team on VIA. And then the jump bikes, of course, entered the market at exactly the same time, 1 week apart. That you don't really realize how traditional thoughts on mobility, which is, frankly, it's been fixed rate service. Society has said and prioritized bus service as their only method in the past to address mobility. And if we think about that for a really, I think Danny brought this up earlier in his public comments, that there are people who wait, parents, probably more in the lower income part of town, but it could be from anywhere, don't want to have a car even, but no. Society has told them, we relegate you to this bus. Good luck. And then they put politicians, or I hate to call myself that, but it is what it is, on boards, and we make decisions about where the bus stop is and how soon it can go, and funding from it becomes precarious because you're dealing with federal state funding, and you got to make choices. And it's just up to this point in the last 3 years has been a journey of understanding, at least for me, about the inequity of that has been that parents can't get their kids to a band practice, or they don't have the opportunities for the arts, or they don't have the opportunity for sports, or they don't have the opportunity, as somebody noted, swim. And by the way, Yellow Bus is still offering youth passes, one of the actions we took for free. So I know Maria asked about that. But I think this is the awakening that cities are having all over America, is that residents deserve more. They deserve the ability, the freedom, the independence to get around. And that's how this started. It's just a simple map we kind of pasted from San Diego, showing, you walk out your door, you got options, and depending kind of where the bus route was or whatever. So this went from that idea and like I said, an initiative from the council that, like, we need to do something different. And so to come up with this document is something else. And it is a big statement about equity in my mind. And I couldn't be prouder that we're getting close to adopting it. I do have some feedback, and I appreciate, first of all, again, your work, Sarah, as always. Again, I'll try to keep it as crisp as possible. First, I appreciate you coming up with a name convention, because if you can't have a document that tries to create equity without getting into the what you corrected. So thank you for doing that. I would also say it's more of a question, and it's the strategies are right. Everything's laid out correctly. In the action plans and the strategies, because I've read through them, and they're all very, very good ideas and ways we can go. But frankly, there's a lot of them. And I worry about our ability to be nimble to look for opportunities that may come that we didn't foresee we didn't foresee whatever. But I think that's just something. I don't know what the prioritization might look like of some of the action plans. Either tiering them by looking at current initiatives the city's already endeavoring in, or the region is endeavoring in, or Yellow Bus is now kind of taking up a different stand in the last few months. So again, I don't know what that looks like, but I really urge you to sort of think about that, because I think the part that I worry about here is staff. Is this going to maybe fall over under its own weight, and that we have too many action plans and we're not going to get to any of them, versus the ability to kind of move quickly and say, okay, here's some short-term wins. Here's some things we can do. And it comes to the other part of the question, was how is it connecting to on, I can find my, on strategy, I think it's 5. Yeah, 5 on my cursor moved. Plan for supportive infrastructure. So in my mind, this is a document. And again, I said this before in the previous one, this in February, before Secretary Buttigieg was fully in. He's fully in on rail. He's fully in on bike. He's fully in. And they're debating it right now at 1.9 billion, whatever it is, $1.9 trillion infrastructure bill. And I just want to make sure we're taking the opportunity, because we have a lot of plans for, whether it's the new bridge, to the conversion of the I Street bridge deck, to other elements we've identified to the bike ped master plan, that we're make sure we're tying into them, so that if we get an opportunity to piece together some funding, is that a way we can think about the infrastructure? Because I just want to make sure there's things we need. I'm thinking about the riverfront. I'm thinking about the I Street bridge. I'm thinking about Sac Avenue, because we've had that discussion around how to make it more pedestrian, active, transportation friendly. I'm just trying to make sure that it's coordinated, so we're not asking for 12 different things from 2 different or 5 different plans, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I attempted to convey this to some extent in my presentation. But the next step of our process is really about going through that prioritization process. And since the map really is about implementing those existing plans and kind of pulling them all together, the Bike Ped Trails Master Plan is, already in large part considered as part of that supportive infrastructure. We've made a huge amount of progress in getting some of the funding to implement what's already in that plan. And I think, one of the next steps is kind of putting it all together. So the 5-year update of the Bike Ped Trails Master Plan will start in then about the next year or so, since it was since it was last done. And coinciding with things like our Sac Avenue Complete Streets Plan, I think, it's kind of a perfect storm of all of these things that are going to be coming together to help us really lock in. We already have a lot of current priorities that have been set by our council members, in regard to Ice Street Bridge debt conversion and those types of things that are setting some of our priorities, but at the smaller scale. So looking at, just getting connections put in for sidewalks, for instance. That's where some of these supportive efforts are going to come into play that I talked about in terms of getting additional funding to do our sidewalk and transportation equity program.
Right.
We just don't even have enough information about the existing condition. We don't have, even a GIS layer of our total sidewalk assets right now. We really need to collect more information to be able to package up those projects and go aggressively, be prepared to take the funding and build it in that regard. So the next step is really, I think, going through identifying, I had this slide where I talked about all of these items that we are already actively proceeding with, things that are going to be really easy to, the low-hanging fruit that we're going to get implemented, that is queued up to ask for more funding, versus some of these newer items that we'll want to come back to, our TMI Commission and Council and get your feedback on what are those key projects we should be pursuing. And in terms of supportive infrastructure, I think beyond just Bike Ped, the thing that we'll also want to be coordinating further on is things like broadband, things like if we do want to start looking at things like automated vehicles or connected infrastructure for safety in the future, really starting to wrap our heads around what types of supportive infrastructure we'll have to, be getting in the ground.
Right.
So.
Well, and part of the strategy there, and I appreciate your comments, and glad the next step is sort of to pull that together. But you're kind of queuing up what we're, again, with a bit of caution around sort of that step, right? Which is, how do we the go forward model and using what you have. Just getting out of the mindset of we don't have to provide all these. Gig car share is a really good example. That's a private sector solution that we just asked if we can come to our side of the river, and they did. Right now, the scooter bike share services is subsidized through SACOG, and that's fine. We will have more of those opportunities, but I just don't want us to get pegged into the notion that we have to be doing all this, and that there's changes happening at the Yolo County Transportation District. SACOG's getting more and more robustly involved in sort of a regional look at the future of transportation. So again, this is where the original concept of this was around us being more having a plan, which we clearly have, a very good one, and really being strategic, but also being very opportunistic and looking at those services. So, and not to mention, and the reason I worry about it is if we're trying to do all this, then we are duplicating services, and I think that's something we just need to be mindful of, because that just ends up being cost, where that cost can be floated into another service that maybe all of Yolo County wants to go into via rideshare. Maybe that's a way to kind of help manage it. So again, I just want those concepts to kind of be thought about as we go forward. So I know I've taken enough time there, so I'll stop here. But Sarah, again, great job on all this, and to the rest of the team.
Councilmember Orozco.
I'm cognizant that it's late too, so I don't want to talk too much. I just want to add that I agree. We've made a lot of progress over the last several years, and it's incremental, but when you look back at it, it's also drastic. Sarah, I always look forward to your presentations. They're very well informed, and I appreciate the fact that you're an expert in your field and that you've brought so many wonderful innovations to the city. I still recall my position back in 2016 when someone suggested that perhaps I use bicycles for our mode of transportation for the family. And I thought that was hilarious. How would I get the boys to the bus stop, on a bike? And, really looking back now, it's cool to see that how much it's changed, because while we're still not going to the bus stop on the bike, we're using all these other means to get around. And, for the first time, riding my bike over to my office, which is, just a stone's throw away from West Sacramento. But, there's a lot we've done, and that a lot that's already in progress and a lot that we still need to do. The reason I'm not riding the bike right now is because I'm still scared, because there's, it's not very safe, but we're getting there. Hopefully, with some of the projects that we're undertaking to get the bike lanes really defined and safer for bicyclists. But, I share that point because it might not be the entire jump to the entire family, but there are little changes that each of us might want to implement that will then transcend to an entire community, which might get us to the goals that we intend. And there's a lot more. I always thought, I agree with my colleague, that equity was always something that was the underpinning behind all of this, is that, motivated it. But it's also other things like, the fact that we're spending millions on roads, and we spent, $17 million on 3 miles worth of West Capitol project and more. And there's so much more need, but, all of that is being impacted by the type of transportation we have running through this city. And I have no pipe dreams that we're all going to just hop on a bike tomorrow. We're all going to just start walking and scooting and doing rideshare. But it's not that preposterous a dream, because we've come so far in such short a time. But if we think about what the investments in our trails and the West Capitol corridor and safe walking on pathways, if we look back and we think about the fact that we had a freeway running through our freaking city, a freeway, that highway is turned into, something, it's a highway still, but it's a lot more calm. And I think that when you look at all of the progress, it's not so hard to imagine that we could be making investments that would reduce the amount of time, work and money that we have to spend on the roads, and you get our people out, our residents out, enjoying their community, as well as like the physical manifestations of a healthier lifestyle, and then also a cleaner environment. And lessen the congestion, as Councilmember Alcala mentioned. We have new developments and all these people. Like, where are we going to put all those cars? We don't have the parking spaces, and the roads are already congested as they are. Like, how can we encourage people to find other ways to travel? And we're small enough, and we're nimble enough to do that. So I'm really excited about the future here. I just wish it could come faster. Honestly, I want those EV charging stations now, even though I don't have a fully electric vehicle. I have a hybrid. But a couple of years ago, I mentioned it, and it sounded like a joke, but I was like, what about when we make investments to police vehicles? And granted, they don't get this fast. So but could we think about hybrids? Can we think about electrifying the investments we're making, with certain, as we talk about budget and whatnot. And I think those are really important conversations to have. And I think that my colleagues have covered all the other comments that I have with respect to the approaches. Thank you, Sarah, very much for the presentation. And, cheers to moving forward.
All right. Thank you so much, council members. Sarah, just excellent report, comprehensive, and did a lot of due diligence and researching and packaging it very well so it's understandable. And just want to applaud you for all your work, your hard work, and all your intelligence, in this. You should be very proud, and all of us are, for your hard work here. Just in addition to, I wanted to listen to Mayor Pro Tem's Ledesma's comments, because these are our big transportation genius behind the scenes trying to make all this work, both here in West Sacramento, Yolo County Transit, and then in SACOG. So, he's got a big role to play in the city, and so appreciated his comments. In some of this one page, one of the things I appreciate is all the work that has been done over the years, and what I think, and I envision what the city, residents and businesses are looking forward to is an expansion of this incredible work that you have started, and we want to continue to see it expand. And in these mobility hubs, when it comes to equity, I think about affordability. And one of the challenges I'm seeing in affordability is that among those that are most impacted are people of color. They're already spending more than 50% of their income on housing. And that is in the SACOG study. So that's what makes it really hard for them to afford transportation to get to work. And, there was a time when I had to work 3 jobs, just to make ends meet. And so in those 3 jobs, I needed my car to get around. And public transportation was not an option. And so, I would get from one place to another, sometimes in one day and sometimes, over the weekend. And you know how that can fluctuate, where public transportation is available during peak hours. And one of the complaints I would hear from people who wanted to use Yolo County Transit was to be able to make it home to their kids. And that was one of my challenges, was traffic, to make it home in time to pick up my children out of daycare, traditional daycare. And I know that we have a good amount of daycare here. And what we also have and noticed in the study in SACOG is that the workers that the people of color, the ones that are lower income, that we're hoping are rely on this is are working in homes, like in home supportive service programs, or they're working in the off hours, janitors, or, just being able, or cleaning homes during the day childcare, they're taking care of other people's children. They're also, like in the medical profession or grocery workers. So these hours are really difficult for them, and they're trying to stay close to home so they can take care of their children and have some semblance of a family life after. And what I like to, just my vision of making this work for them, as far as equity, is access. That was one word that when we were in the SACOG Equity and Inclusion work group is, what's important for me, it's access, being able to give them access to what we're presenting here today. And so that's when, Councilmember Alcala asked the question, who's your audience in developing this? And so that's why when you referenced early on in your presentation that this is a live document, this mobility action plan can be modified. And that's important. That's something that, Chris and I have learned in Yolo County Transit is that sometimes the bus stops were not working and we see one person in the bus for long periods of time in a huge bus. So, we needed to pivot to try to figure out what would accommodate more people, because it gets expensive if we invest so much money in something that's not working for a good majority of the people. So with all that, one of the things I'd like to be able to see, in the future is a sliding scale and drawing down funding. So drawing down like CalWorks, funding for participants in the CalWorks program because they get transportation, or SSI, those that are with disabilities who rely on public transportation, being able to make sure we can accommodate those that are older and are more reliant, whether it be the electric vehicle so they can go to their doctor's appointment, those that are mentally ill, sometimes they don't like public transportation. It's very scary. So trying to work and weave in with county services, in some way, they know what the challenges are with our most vulnerable members of our community, especially after COVID. I am seeing that there are members of the community who don't want to take the vaccine. Also will not be there's this way of thinking that they just like, we're not going to go in public transportation either. So there's this factor that deters them from things that your norm does not, participate in, whether it be taking your vaccines, especially the COVID vaccine right now, but it's probably one of the best vaccines that has ever been produced in our history. So, I wish they'd understand that, but it is. But along with public transportation, for some reason, they just don't use it and they'll go grab their old car and rely on that. So trying to get them to work it and weave it in may take a lot of social media, may take people, who speak their language that look like them. So in doing the outreach, seeing that they are the participants. So going into their media groups, whether it be, maybe even the Mexican consulate, bringing them in back here and showing that, hey, you can get from here to the Mexican consulate or any place that like the Latino population, large Latino population frequents, or the large Russian population who, we see driving in their cars to go to the food bank. And they are there, but that tells me that there is definitely large groups of people in our community, and even those that are unsheltered who are going to be, residing in Project Home Key. We're going to, we want them to become more independent, relying on public transportation to get to services. And so that's where the county can step in again and provide public transportation. So if we can work together, whether it be stipend or some kind of way to automate getting, funds in an account for them, so then they can use it automatically and you don't have to rely on being in the middle, but trying to figure out ways for that to happen in the future. And so when I think of all of these are some of the thoughts I have in mind as we move forward, and making it work for everybody in our community. Which I know you're extremely sympathetic and understanding of. You just had a lot to say, so I just wanted to cover that as well. So look forward to seeing it back on consent and approving something that we can let you get back to work and gather all that grant money, because this is definitely, as Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma, Secretary Pete Buttigieg is gearing up to help local jurisdictions, and having a plan in place like this is definitely lining us up to be able to be a recipient of those grants, as we have been already through SACOG and other grants that we have received in the last year. So yeah, and I don't think we need any action tonight, right? No, okay. We will take it back now. Any other comments or suggestions? No, all right. We'll go to our next regular agenda item, number 15. Under Finance Technology is consideration of the fiscal year 2021-2022 and fiscal year 22-23 operations and maintenance and capital improvement program budget update. And our director, Roberta Rapier, will provide an overview again of today's workshop. There you are, Roberta.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I know this is late. This is actually workshop number 2. So I will spend my time today focusing on changes, things that have changed since our last discussion, and things that are proposed for adoption by council at the next council meeting, the 16th. So I will share my screen. I've got a brief presentation for you tonight. And all right. So as I mentioned, this is the second budget workshop. At the last budget workshop on May 19th, we met. I provided a presentation and a very detailed report. We discussed the assumptions which informed the development of the proposed operations and maintenance budgets, as well as the supplemental O&M and CIP budget requests. At that workshop, let's see, I always have to figure out how to get going here. There we go. So skip the agenda. We're going to go straight to background. At the last workshop, council asked questions and provided feedback on some of the specific proposals, and expressed an overarching concern regarding adoption of general fund ongoing and one-time budget requests, given the uncertainty that still exists regarding the recovery of general fund revenues once the economy reopens. The council also expressed a desire to have a financial sustainability strategy to create capacity in the general fund to address budget gaps for personnel growth to keep pace with rising population and demand for public services, employee compensation to remain competitive in the marketplace, to recruit and retain talented staff, and to fund general maintenance and replacement of city infrastructure, vehicles, and equipment. So at that meeting, staff proposed an alternative approach to the budget process, which would allow for council to consider adoption of the status quo O&M budgets on June 16th to meet the legal requirements for adopting a budget before the start of the fiscal year. Additionally, staff proposed another evaluation of the supplemental O&M and CIP budget requests to reprioritize the requests and identify those that really should be considered now and those that could be delayed for future consideration. It is important to note that based on current projections of revenue recovery over the next few years, that the general fund did show the capacity to fund what was presented in the last meeting. However, it is prudent to delay some of the requests until we know more, including how quickly our revenues might recover to pre-pandemic levels, and eligible uses of the ARP funds from the federal government. There's a lot of work being done around the revenue loss calculations and some of the guidance from the U.S. Treasury that is troublesome for cities looking to move forward projects that were delayed in their general fund because of the revenue losses. So again, a lot of the one-time requests were proposed against general fund are proposed to, excuse me, some of the one-time requests proposed against general fund are proposed to be delayed now because of the ARP funds. And again, the calculation for lost revenues. I'm losing my spot. So it looks like I'm getting into a conversation about ARP revenues. So one of the things that we found since the last meeting, as we dig further into the U.S. Treasury guidance, is the calculation on lost revenues. There are the U.S. Treasury guidance, the interim guidance proposes to aggregate all revenues across the city. So that would include grant revenues from the states and local agencies. It would include our special revenue funds that have legally restricted revenues for specific purposes. We mentioned earlier, the road fund revenues can only be used for road maintenance. We also have a new tax measure, Measure N, that came on that started around the time that the closures began in 2019-20. And so all of those revenues would count against our revenue loss in the general fund. We're seeing a lot of development. So we have development impact fee revenues coming in that are also counted in aggregate against lost general fund revenues. And so as we continue to wade through the guidance and work with U.S. Treasury and provide responses to them on a lot of the questions that they asked, we are waiting for revised guidance to be able to fully understand what we can do with those with the ARP funds and how much could be used to replace some of the lost revenues that we've seen over the last couple of years to help us move forward some projects that were delayed because of the pandemic. So I'm also serving in a working group of folks from the League of California Cities and fiscal officers across the state to develop a model or a tool for cities to use to calculate the lost revenues based on the current guidance. And we're also providing information to the U.S. Treasury in hopes of having them revise some of the guidance. The closing date for providing responses to a lot of the questions that they asked in the interim guidance is July 16th. And so we do expect that we'll have some final guidance or at least some revised guidance from them by August. So as a result, we are proposing to delay some of the items that you saw in the last workshop. So after the last budget workshop, staff reviewed the supplemental requests, paying particular attention to those which have impacts on the general fund and requests that would result in significant operational impacts or impacts to service delivered to the citizens and our customers, as well as those that would result in more cost than benefit to the city if they were delayed, are proposed for consideration now, and they'll be brought back with council agreement on June 16th. Those that could reasonably be delayed a few months without significant impacts are proposed to be delayed until sometime in the fall. Both once we have final guidance on ARP funds, we've got a strategy developed and vetted by council to create longer term capacity in the general fund. So as a result of this reprioritization process, staff was able to propose delaying about 53% of all requests on a total dollar basis and about 85% of general fund requests. So we'll get really quickly into the delayed requests. The details of these requests are included in the attachments to your budget packet. Attachments 2B, 3B, and 4B provide the details of all of the requests that are proposed to be delayed. It's a total of $20.9 million in supplemental and capital project funding requests are proposed to be delayed for future consideration. That includes $18.3 million in one-time or CIP appropriations, which includes $6.8 million in general fund impacts, and $1.3 million in annual ongoing appropriations, including approximately $500,000 in general fund impacts. So the table on this slide is also included in your report. It provides the requests by category that are proposed to be delayed. And like I said, details are included in the attachment to your report. This table, also included in the agenda packet, provides the total budget requests by category that are proposed to move forward for council consideration on June 16th. The requests proposed to move forward for consideration now include $17.6 million in one-time requests, including about a little over $16 million in CIP. And for the general fund, the total one-time requests are $882,000. The ongoing proposed requests proposed to move forward for consideration on June 16th are about $500,000 annually, with the general fund request making up about half of that amount at about $250,000. And those, the details for the requests that are proposed to move forward are on your attachments 2A, 3A, and 4A in your report. All right, so for the tax measure funds, Measure E, we've got total budget requests of about $1.8 million. 1.6 million of that is towards CIP projects, and an ongoing request of just over 110,000 annually toward the expanded open space cleanup function in the homelessness program. Measure E is expected to have ongoing available surplus of $2 million annually after funding the requests, and a remaining balance of $4.6 million before any ARP funds are reimbursed for the project home key expenses. Measure K has total CIP requests of 1.1 million. The ongoing requests total 15,000 for Measure K funded firefighter overtime. And Measure K would have an annual surplus of 800,000 after funding these requests, and would have an ongoing available balance of 900,000. For Measure N, there is 106,000 in total requests against the public safety and inclusive economic development categories, and that would leave a one-time balance of 9.1 million in the Measure N fund. There are no requests this round for the Measure V tax measure. This slide shows the CIP request by project type. About half the dollar value of requests for CIP project funding are proposed to be delayed, leaving just over 16 million in requests proposed for consideration by council on June 16th. If you add nearly 10 million in grant funding towards these requests, the total CIP for the 2 years at this point is requested at 26 million. So this chart shows the breakdown of that 26 million by project type. And it shows that the road maintenance and rehabilitation projects and other transportation related projects and parks and recreation projects are the primary focus of the CIP at this time, with just under 6.5 million proposed for road maintenance and road rehabilitation projects. All right. This slide shows a comparison overall of what was presented at the May 19th workshop and what is proposed for this workshop for consideration on June 16th as it relates to the general fund ongoing requests. And so the table on the left shows what it would have looked like if we'd moved forward with all of the requests against the general fund at the last meeting. The table on the right shows the currently proposed items. So this is a result of the reprioritization process that the staff has gone through over the past 2 weeks since the last council meeting. The general fund is expected to have ongoing available surplus of 376,000 next fiscal year, and nearly $2 million in fiscal year 22-23 after funding the proposed requests. Let's see. This slide shows the same comparison for the one-time requests. The general fund is expected to have a balance of $9.6 million after funding the proposed requests. And you'll see the one-time requests total about $882,000. That's $292,000 towards fire department vehicles and equipment, so replacement of 2 aging fire engines, and then $590,000 towards capital projects. You can see clearly that departments took the reprioritization process very seriously when identifying what should move forward now and what can wait a few months. I put into the report that some of the things that we looked at, and I think I mentioned it earlier, it's really a matter of timing. So while certain items are proposed to be considered at a future date, they are all priorities for departments and city management. And it's just a matter of timing. So our staff, as well as this council, I know realizes that the current timing is challenging and understands the difficulty in making decisions at this time with unknown recovery of our revenues. And difficult decisions must be made as we start to recover from the pandemic and the shuttering of the economy that came with it. So what you'll see proposed tonight are things, again, that really would cause significant impacts to operations if they were delayed, and that's why they are proposed today. The remaining items, as we mentioned, we'd work on a strategy over the next few months and bring those back to council likely in the fall after we have better information on recovery of our revenues and on the eligible uses of the ARP funds. So looking at our long-term model, this shows the results of the long-term model with the proposals that were presented in the last meeting. So you can see here we had a lot of one-time items over the next couple of years, and the yellow provides the ongoing budget requests. And with the proposal last time, you show that we were by fiscal year 26-27 projecting a deficit. So the next slide shows what that looks like with the revisions that are proposed today. It gets us a lot further. We get to about 27-28 before we start to see potential deficit. And if we do see recovery in our revenues back to pre-pandemic levels, then the entire 10 years of the model is actually sustainable. So where do we go from here? I wanted to spend just a little bit of time on the presentation to allow the council to have more time to ask questions or provide feedback on the proposed budget items. So today, we are just having our second workshop to discuss the budget items, looking at the reprioritized budget requests that are proposed for consideration by council on June 16th. On June 16th, we would come back for council consideration and adoption of the status quo O&M budgets and the supplemental O&M and CIP requests that council is supportive of moving forward with after today's meeting. July 1st would be the effective date for the new budget. And over the summer and fall, we would develop and workshop with council or a subcommittee of council a proposed strategy for creating capacity in the general fund to fund the various things that were discussed and identified as priorities for council at the last meeting. And in the fall of 2021, we would plan to return to council for consideration of the delayed budget requests. So with that, I believe my presentation is done, and I would like to open it up to council to provide their comments and feedback and ask questions on any of the items that are proposed to move forward at this time.
Thank you, Roberta. Okay, so just wanted to bring it back to council to see if you have any questions. Okay, I guess I'll open it up for public comment and check to see if we received public comment. Madam Clerk, any requests to speak?
There are no speakers.
Okay. And I believe we received one public comment in writing, but there is one more by Sacramento area firefighters. I don't know if you, I think I did see the council members were emailed, and I sent it over to the city manager and our city clerk. So that email was related to this budget item, requesting a continuing resolution to give us more time to review the 2-year budget. And this is out of concern for the department, fire department's staff, infrastructure, and line personnel, which is increasing and higher than ever before. So closing the public comment, bringing it back to council. Councilmember Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I did read that letter from the firefighters, and I have to say that I support this continuing resolution before we approve this budget. I agree with them.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd have to make a motion for this or just.
City manager has a.
Can I just comment on that? First of all, yeah, we did receive a copy of the letter. It wasn't addressed as public comment for this meeting, so we did provide it to the council as a general communication. I'll just comment that I think the work that the staff did following up on the direction from the last meeting is very much a reflection of that concern, that it's not a full-on continuing resolution, which I think they mean is sort of a status quo budget, but it is very mindful of preserving capacity in both the general fund and other funding sources as we learn more. You know, I don't want to repeat everything Roberta said in her presentation, but the general message is we do want to take a little bit more time to better understand some of the factors that weigh in here. But we would not recommend a simple status quo adoption of the budget to put everything on hold because we have heavily scrutinized the items that we are proposing. We feel like we're in a good place with both identifying the ones that really need to move forward today, while also being mindful that there's going to be future needs that need to be addressed, and preserving in the general fund alone $2 million in current capacity for items going forward. We'll come back and look at those items that we're requesting to delay, as we also balance that with other needs that the city has that were identified in the report. So, like I said, I would not recommend a simple status quo budget adoption, and instead we request the council consider the items we've identified moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Any other comments from the council members? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
I'll go. Thank you. And no, thank you, Roberta, for once again the thorough work. Sorry, it's getting late. The thorough work again on the budget, and really listening to our concerns at the last workshop. I'm not going to delve into sort of a lot of the details, but having two things. One is thanks for showing kind of the comparative budgets that you proposed on, was that May 19th? Is that right? And today, kind of, so that it is showing that you know the overriding message here is just we will need to plan, and you will have to research a lot of the investments we're thinking about and how the strategies that we may need going forward to make sure the general fund is sustainable over a long period of time. I think that's the imperative here. And so I understand sort of what was intended here is exactly what we talked about 2 weeks ago, which is if we can put some things off, we can hold tight as close as we can, minus some critical issues. And I want to thank the department heads and staff for kind of coming up and having the scrutinous eye on expenses so that we can get to that exercise later in the fall. And kind of looking through them, I'm not going to quibble over certain expenditures versus others at this point, because I know there's some very important things in there that each department head has to think quite a bit about, and they've been planning for months, if not years, to kind of get to those items they need to expend. So, you know, I think one of the things that comes to mind in this kind of as we go towards the budget is sort of, and you put the long-term funding model is just this concept of budgeting and kind of how we've gone about it and where we are, and we are in a fairly good position that we're not talking about cuts today and in this budget at all. we're not other cities that are facing deficits. We're talking about possible deficits in years out, either in the first model iteration of the model was, so I think 25, 26, we start seeing deficits, and then the later model, the secondary model, we start seeing it in later years 8 and 9. And, you know, we never know. The assumptions on revenue are certainly ones that we hope can hold up post-pandemic. But there's also some expense things that we will have to grapple with that I know you built it into the model as well, which is most notably as contributions to CalPERS for those ongoing payments, which fluctuate. And so again, I think the prudent thing here is just to do exactly what's being proposed as we think about those things and try to come up with a plan and a budget and strategies for maybe the general fund later in the year. I think this is the right thing to do. So I don't really have much to add, but Roberta, thanks for the time, extended time. I think that was yesterday going through the details of it. And I appreciate all the work you put into this and all the staff as well.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. I have a couple of questions, Roberta. You referenced there is a page in the May 19th report of the O&M items that are in addition to the list you shared with us that are being proposed to be maintained to move forward. Where is that in the old agenda? I'm having a hard time finding that page.
We provided the previous report as an attachment, but I don't know that I've referenced anything in the old report. In the current report, there are attachments 2A, 3A, and 4A, and those include the details of the items that are proposed to move forward now, and the ones with general fund impact are highlighted. I'm happy to pull that up if you'd like to see it. On screen, I'm trying to think. It's in the attachment.
I do remember that. I do have those. Let me see.
Just to help, what was the specific item that you were referencing there that you had a question about?
I just wanted to look at the list really quick, and I just having a hard time finding that. But so there's that, and then as far as what you're thinking of postponing and moving forward, and the concerns raised around, general fund is the main one for me, is just to preserve our general fund. And I'm glad you found a way to reduce the expense around general fund. But we are using other funding sources, which I think I recall you earlier saying could be a part of general fund as well. But it has a kind of like a policy framework around it, as was considered by the voters to use as an expense. And on some of those, for example, the home run program is an ongoing expense related to Measure E. And homelessness is another one, which we've been able to recoup, being able to get, even though it's a little late, some FEMA funding, or the ARP funding could be used to cover that expense. And so I'm glad to hear that, because, taking a look at what we can potentially use the ARP funding for, if it is not backfilling our, which is an eligible use, by the way, backfilling our reduction to, revenue, lost revenue. So then after that, trying to figure out what else we can use the ARP funding, which I know you're diligently working on that particular issue, which we won't have any guidance till, I think, right around the time that you're taking a look at bringing some of these items back. But the question around a continuing resolution, just either Erin or Roberta or the city manager, can you explain what exactly that means, what that policy entails?
I think the idea in the letter, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is they're asking for essentially adopt your status quo O&M budget from last year until more things are settled. And that's essentially The direction you gave at the last meeting was not exactly that, but it was, hey, let's look at, a second look at these items that we're requesting with particular mind to those that have general fund impacts, and then bring back items that, we've identified as ones that really need to move forward. You'll notice if you go to those attachments that Roberta mentioned, especially the B attachments are the ones that are the items that we're recommending delaying. Those are predominantly items that have general fund impacts. So departments were very mindful of that direction. And as a result of that, we significantly increased the amount of capacity that's available in the general fund. So you can see, I think Roberta has the slide up here. And so I know you had a slide that had the net effect, but we essentially freed up about $1 million in additional capacity in the general fund in the second year by making those adjustments. I'm not sure exactly what was meant by that request, but generally when we talk about continuing resolutions at the federal level, it's sort of holding over a budget from the last year just to keep the government going. We wouldn't recommend that. Like I said, I'm going to repeat myself, but we have items that we've identified here that, we would recommend moving forward because they have a particular sense of urgency or they don't have an effect on the general fund.
And that I'm interested in learning more specifically because we have like items in Measure E that maybe we can possibly postpone until we see what our revenue looks like, because that is a sales tax revenue source. And I just want to make sure that we have enough funding for that. I know we have projected revenues, and we also have currently the fund balance, which looks, okay, but I do want to be able to, as we look forward in the future, to determine, okay, yes, we can make that expense in projects like projects that are referenced in Measure E. Some of the projects that are like the home run, I think those are ongoing. We have, a lot of publicity out on that, so we don't want to see that negatively impacted. And can you go over exactly specifically what are the proposed appropriations is that you're looking at that you're really concerned about?
Are you referring to the appropriations in the general fund or a specific fund?
It's the one that Aaron referenced that we should really move forward with.
Those are all the ones in the A tables. So in the staff report, there are attachments that have they're numbered attachments. This is the slide right here. So the 2A, for example, are the decision packages that staff is recommending we move forward with. The B attachments are the ones that we have identified that can be delayed without any kind of operational impact. But generally speaking, the A's are items that either have a reason for urgency or they don't have an impact on the general fund. And so you mentioned, there are some that are out of Measure E. And we can say confidently that all of the expenditures proposed coming from one of the tax measures, two things. One, they are eligible expenditures and appropriate expenditures under the tax measure policies, the advisory policies. And then two, there is capacity in each of the tax measure funds without impacting other budget priorities. So we don't really have any tax measure items that we would say we would recommend holding off on, other than the ones that are in the B group.
Okay, so a continuing resolution would be to go back and make a recommendation for all the prior, like last month's presentation on all those budget items. That would be moving that forward. But what you're recommending is something less than that, than the continuing resolution.
No, generally what a continuing resolution means is you table all the new requests and you just carry forward your budget from the prior year. That's in the federal scheme of things. That's what continuing resolution typically means.
Yeah, if I think I was going to call in Jeff because this is a legal thing to a degree.
Yeah, that's why I asked Jeff early on.
So,
because
I'm familiar with the concept of continuing resolution. It's not a phrase that I hear in connection with local government in the same way that it's used in the federal government. Usually, as I've seen it referred to in local government, it is basically adopting last year's budget.
Is it adopting?
It's actually it's because I'm sorry. This is sort of what I day job a little bit. So it's actually an extension of the current budget, and so they look in at 30 days, 3 months, 6 months, just so they don't have to adopt a budget. And the part that I think I'm mindful of here is that we have to pass a budget. We're not the federal government that gets a hall pass on those types. I think legal obligation to pass a budget by June.
Where it comes down to is appropriations. You need to make appropriations. You can't spend money without appropriations. And so the budget is your appropriations mechanism, right? So you end the fiscal year, you have no more authorization to spend money. You need to have done something to authorize keeping the lights on, paying employees, all the routine expenses that are not new programs. So I think what Councilmember Ledesma is saying is essentially what I was trying to say. A continuing resolution is an action to continue the existing expenditures, but it's essentially continuing your same budget forward. No changes from what you had in it, which in some cases and for a short period of time could be fine, but every year's budget is a little different. And so it's at some point you start to get a bit out of whack because you're continuing something that was put in place for expenditures that you anticipated in the previous year. It's not a process that I've seen used by cities. I'm not familiar with any city that I've ever worked for that's ever done a continuing resolution or something like it. The closest we've gotten is what is sometimes referred to as a maintenance budget or a continuation of sort of the status quo, with taking out any new projects, but continuing the ongoing expenses. So maybe it's semantics, what you call it, but as far as I know, there's nothing in state law that describes something called a continuing resolution.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question? I'm just trying to understand, as we're asking about what the continuing resolution is and what its impact would be. But can I just ask of my colleagues? I know Councilmember Alcala, you were in support of the continuing resolution. Am I correct? Could you just help me understand why?
I still have a lot of questions about the budget that I'm hoping to sit down and go over with staff. At this point, I'm still not. I realized, I went through this as well, but I just feel at this point, I'm not prepared to vote on the budget right now.
We went through this entire budget workshop the last meeting and spent an extended amount of time.
Right, and there were certain things.
Was there something in there that I think that what staff did was they listened to what the feedback we had, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that we were intending on anticipating not only the unknown impacts of a post-COVID world and whether or not we would ever regress or be in a situation that we didn't want to find ourselves in, but also position ourselves appropriately for labor negotiations and all of the upcoming needs that our city will need as we recover. And so what I'm seeing here is just a more conservative approach. It's not a flat no to these projects. It's just a delay for now. So I see a lot of stuff on here that is on the B list, but I'm not panicking because I'm thinking, well, we can always go back and get those things. I just thought we were just trying to approach this in a thoughtful way until we got a little bit more information and then say, okay, yes, bring those B things back. And that's not to say that this isn't set in stone. I mean, we could look at this right now and say, well, no, I want to pull this or that from B, right? So I'm wondering, because I noticed the reference to Measure E, and I'm wondering, Madam Mayor, was there something specific that you were targeting in Measure E that was causing you concern based on this budget proposal tonight?
Oh, I'm taking a look at all the measures and considering what it is we need to spend money on and continue, and what is, what we can continue for a short period of time until, we made some decisions, because we have to take a look at expenditures as what's been described by Roberta. There is in 2027, we are taking a look at a deficit. And if we don't take a look at our expenditures now, I mean, we might as well make some of the challenging decisions on some of these expenditures. And I do get that in the decision packages, there are some things that are one-time costs that we could take into consideration for now in the 2A decision package. These are one-time costs that I see. And then there's some ongoing costs. But the one time is the $865,000, which I think is manageable. And then there are some, ongoing costs as well. But long term, as we continue taking a look at year over year, same expenses, we need to really evaluate, because when we took a look at some of those things in Measure E, as we received presentations, we were not given the full budget picture until now. And once now we have the full budget picture, these are postponements from COVID. We have to take, we have to make some decisions.
Well, right, but I think that's the point, right? I mean, I think that was what Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma was trying to say, is that we're trying to avoid a deficit, sooner than later. And so this is the whole point of us paring down these proposals, which is what got us here today. We have capacity in Measure E for certain expenditures, and we would get reimbursed from federal funds as well. I think the concern was that we were trying to pare back what was impacting the general fund that might get us in trouble sooner. Mm-hmm. And so by doing that, what I see before us is something that is an improvement, just conservative improvement over the last budget package. I mean, I felt like we went through this with a fine-tooth comb and then had 2 additional weeks to look at it all over again. And I don't have a lot of time, but I spent the time and invested it from the ball field to familiarize myself with the changes here. Again, none of it's really, there are things that we can change as we talk about this, but I just don't think throwing this out the window is the answer either. We have a job to do, and that is to exercise our best judgment in coming up with a fiscally prudent approach to how we're spending money for our city. And so when we're talking about recreation floor resurfacing, yeah, that can wait. Sorry, unless somebody's going to slip and fall, or there's something uneven, and we have a liability issue, I would say that maybe that could be put off. If it's just not that shiny right now, we need a little luster later, fine. But I don't think that that's an expenditure that needs to happen now. But if there are things that you think that are on the B list that need to be on the A list, call it out so we can figure out what it is, what the concerns are, and maybe work together to move this forward.
If I could, again, just emphasize that the work that we did since the last workshop was really focused at your direction on the general fund, given that the vast majority of the general fund expenses are in our core services departments. Hearing that, there was a strong interest in the council in trying to make sure that we maintain capacity, not just for looking out to 2027, like someone mentioned, but also looking at the next 2 years, what some of the needs are going to be beyond the items that are on these lists. We've identified those in the staff report, things like maintaining our service levels through adequate staffing, maintaining competitiveness on staff compensation, making sure that we're keeping up with ongoing maintenance. So we know we have areas that need to be addressed. What we try to do is create capacity through looking at the items that could wait in the general fund to give time to address those. And then also the follow-up to that, which has been mentioned several times in the report and presentations. Roberta and I will be working thoroughly on a strategy to look at ways to free up additional general fund capacity through the use of different options the council could have to use existing revenues within the advisory measure language, the voter approved categories, but in a way that can free up additional general fund capacity. I hesitate. I would advise that, to look at the tax measures a little differently, because like we said, we do have capacity in the tax measures to fund the things that we've identified, and they are appropriate to the tax measure categories. So again, the direction was to go look at the general fund. That's what we did. And as a result of that, you have the A and the B list as our recommendation.
Councilmember Alcala?
I still need more time with Roberta, and there are things on here that I'm just not comfortable with. So Roberta, I'd like an opportunity to go over them with you.
Yeah, and we've provided opportunities. We'd be happy to do more. And, I think we have between now and June 16th. But, we have, like it's been said, we have a budget that we need to adopt. We feel like we've done a lot of work. The day after the meeting, we brought all the department heads together, gave them direction to through each of their items very thoroughly and identify anything that could wait. So we spent a lot of time in the last 2 weeks doing that work. We feel like we're in a good place now. We freed up capacity of over $1 million in the general fund. And we've identified the items that really do have impacts on services or things that are urgent for other reasons that needed to move forward. So we'd appreciate if there are line item directions tonight. If there's items that anyone has concerns with, we could address it tonight. But we do have 2 more weeks between now and when the budget needs to be adopted as well. So, but I just can't emphasize enough the work that went in to get us to this point, following up the council's direction from last time.
No, Aaron, I thank you for that, but I'm just saying there's still items I want to go over, and I'm hoping Roberta, can help me through these items.
Say we go over them now. Let's just do it.
No, I'm not going to do it now.
Well, we have one job. We have one job.
I understand that, Councilwoman.
And that's to do our homework and ensure that we're doing and passing a budget for our city.
And we are going to pass the budget.
But we should be doing that in a timely fashion, respecting the time and investment that our staff has put into making this work for us.
Right.
I mean,
but I'm
no
not prepared.
Disrespect, Councilmember Alcala, but we have to make.
Corina,
can we not have this process?
Yeah.
Can we ask first to speak before you speak? We're getting a little bit out of order here. Right now, Councilmember Alcala has the floor to share what she's thinking, and you are cutting her off. Can you hold off for just a second? I will let you speak right after.
Yeah, and I'm just telling you, I still need to meet with Roberta until I feel comfortable with this. I'm not going to move to approve.
Could we ask that you provide time that you're available to meet with us?
Yes, tomorrow or Friday would be fine.
Okay, we can follow up, but it would be nice to make sure that we are able to schedule that with you.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilmember Alcala. Councilmember Orozco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I apologize. It's frustrating. I know we all have our own individual commitments that we have to make, and I'm grateful that I've had colleagues stand in, specifically Councilmember Alcala stood in for me when I can't make daytime meetings. But I think the budget is the most important job we do as a council, and more than any other job. This is the document that reflects our values, and I spent hours of my own time away from my children to invest in understanding and going line by line about what it is that we're paying for. And I had actually asked which of my colleagues hadn't met because I wanted to make sure that I knew to stay away from certain questions and not ask and have any violation of Brown Act if just anticipating my questions. And so I knew who did and who did not. And the thing is, I think that when we are in a situation like this, it's imperative for us to do our homework ahead of time. And this is not a diss or this is not an insult. I'm just frustrated because we're here at 11:07 at night, and our questions should have been asked by the time we got to this item. I see things. All I'm trying to do is nail where the concerns are so we can address them now and move forward. because I'm just not hearing any specifics. I heard that we got a letter saying don't do it, and we're just going okay, and that doesn't make sense to me when this entire department head, all the department heads got together and came up with something that answered our questions and our requests at the last meeting. So forgive my tone, but I'm tired and I want to do some work. And frankly, I feel like we've lost hours of our time right now because we're not prepared to make decisions, informed decisions.
Thank you, Councilmember Oslo. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma, do you have anything else to
add? No, we got 2 weeks. And this budget is, in my mind, the right direction we need to go. I appreciate, again, staff spending all their time making tough decisions, but we have 2 weeks and we've got to have a spending plan. That's it. We get a letter from our friends who have a concern, but we don't do continuing resolutions here. We're not the federal government. We don't print our own money when we can't meet a budget. We have to meet a budget. And, but I think I understood their intent, which is hold tight as best you can until we can figure out some long-term solutions, which is what what staff is exactly doing. So I just ask the same. We got 2 weeks, guys, ladies. Let's get to work.
Thank you. And I appreciate all the work that the staff has put into and the follow-up recommendation. You know, we have some major decisions to make. These are lasting, and you know, I don't know to what extent we can pull back. I mean, I've heard we approve something and we can potentially cut something if we find ourselves in, you know, a fiscal, you know, challenging situation, which we were having those discussions, I think last July and August. We were taking a look at, you know, potential layoffs if our budget situation was not getting any better. And we managed to do much better than we expected. And on top of that, receive funding from the American Rescue Plan, which we're still trying to figure out how we can spend it. But also, you know, I'd like to be able to, you know, articulate how that's being spent, even if it's early in the process. It's something that I would like to see identified so we can provide transparency to our constituencies as to where we are about the expenditure of that funding. It's something that we can articulate, like it's going to fund after school care, you know, and provide additional support for our youth who've been sheltering in place, or it's going to go fund broadband, or it's going to fund, you know, bikes and pedestrians lanes. So, you know, some of the challenges that I have, you know, as a new mayor has been, you know, finding out how the budget process works. And we did receive, just, you know, for the public to know, we did receive in our strategic planning meeting a workshop, a budget workshop. And in that budget workshop, it was kind of later in the day. We had extensive discussions, and it was later in the day. And it's during that period of time that we would provide some guidance and feedback as a council as it relates to our long-term strategic plan. When the budget was produced, I didn't see the funding set aside for what was considered in the strategic plan, which would have been the farmers market. I think that's what Councilmember Alcala has been asking about, but I didn't see that in there either. And then the broadband, I don't see that in here. So those are, and it may require with the $7 billion a match. So what I'm looking at is a budget in front of us where we are hearing from our constituents our priorities, and I appreciate Councilmember Orozco and Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma that this is something that reflects our values. But these are all things we supported, and we said it may not happen this year, but it may happen next year. But it's not still included in the budget. So, you know, I'm not sure how it gets folded in. You know, if it's something that gets added in, if we have extra money somewhere, and we can incorporate it, or if there's planning behind the scenes to incorporate it further down the road. But I think that's what prompts, you know, a council member to object. You know, because it was asked in the last meeting, and you know, I just like to, you know, and in the strategic plan, I think we kind of went through the time because, during COVID, we still wanted to make sure nobody got sick. So we just rushed through it. But I was asking in between that time and then the Friday when the budget package was released to be able to go over it again, but I didn't get the chance to do that. I know that we wanted to take a look at the full budget, which I found very difficult to understand and read. So I tried, and Roberta spent a couple of good hours, going over it with me, and I appreciate that. But this isn't like my budget that I put out there. This is the staff and the administration's budget. And considering all we are faced with and the revenue sources that are available and figuring out how we can weave all of that into our general fund so we have the capacity is extremely important for me to accomplish. And if a continuing resolution, as Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma is not saying we're not funding anything, it may be funding a few things, but it's not going to be, some of them may be permanent, but not everything is permanent. It leaves the door open for council to decide what we want to fund for the long term. And I'm just wanting to allow that flexibility among council members to be able to accomplish that. Approving on June 15 would be the 2-year plan where we cannot shift back or take anything and remove it off the table. And I'm just, wanting to support the effort of keeping it fluid between now and the day we can decide. And that may be until September, or October when we take a look at, and I'm not sure if we can go that far out, when we can take a look at what are the other revenue sources so that we can continue to fund these things. Now, there are items in that you, I think, described to the city manager, and you described that there are items in here that need to be funded that I kind of want to understand. I see 2A and 3A, and I think in 4A, and I think those are the items you are referring to.
Yeah, and if I could respond to a couple things there. So one, it is often the case when the council does a strategic plan that it's actually more commonplace that the items that make it onto the strategic plan aren't immediately followed with the budget allocation. Part of the strategic plan process is staff takes those items, goes back and fills in the steps that need to happen to advance them. And in the case of the two that you mentioned, we have 2 strategic plan items that we'll be bringing forward when we come to adopt it, either the next meeting or the meeting after that. Those are both items that fit within existing tax measure policies, and we have capacity. It would have been premature to put in an unknown number. It would have been a placeholder, if anything, for either one of those. So that's typically not part of the strategic plan process where we immediately follow with the budget allocation for each item. We have to study the item, put together the plan, and then come up with what the budget capacity would be. And part of what we do in that action plan is identify any budget constraints. So on both of the items you mentioned, there's plenty of capacity to advance them going forward, and we'll be detailing that when we bring back the plan. When we have items go forward, for example, farmers market, we say this is how much it's going to cost. This is who will operate it. These are contracts we need to fund. We would then, as we do often with items that happen midstream with the budget or during the budget year, we figure out the funding plan and bring it forward to council for approval. You mentioned, it's the administration is the budget proposal. That's actually the budget is by nature in local government. Part of my job responsibility is to propose a budget as a city manager, so that this budget is a reflection of that responsibility. We put it together with the staff based on the council direction. But I just want to clarify that is the typical process. The city manager does propose the budget. Now, in terms of the items that you were asking about on the list, so the A lists, again, are the items that we've identified after prior council direction from the last meeting to be mindful of general fund capacity. We identified these items as ones that, for different reasons, so in some cases, it was a matter of urgency because, for example, the learning ladder, recommendations. We have positions that we are interested in. The council seemed very supportive of preserving staff positions. Those are allocations that plan does not work if we don't adopt a budget with those included. There are other items that are, potentially less urgent, but have some reason, operational reason why staff feels strongly they should move forward. There are others that I mentioned also earlier that don't have an impact on the general fund. They're coming from either an enterprise fund, a tax measure, and they don't have an impact that would have been able to fund something else. The general fund is your most fungible category of dollars, and that's why we're putting the emphasis on trying to preserve capacity there. So, so this is a bit. I'm sure you can tell we're a little flustered here because we didn't expect to get this direction. Trying to understand it, we felt that we followed up on council direction from the last meeting to come up with the list that we did, both on the operations budget and on the CIP. Like I said, we left capacity of over almost $2 million a year in general fund capacity with changes, and we're prepared to do a lot more work, as I mentioned, to address ways to free up other general fund capacity going forward. But we do need some time for that, and that's why we're recommending the B list, which is all the items to delay until we can do that additional work to figure out that we can both fund them and the other council priorities that have been talked about, including staffing, compensation, maintenance, and so on. So let me just say that in response. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so in item 1 and item 2A, and taking a look at those items, we see $865,000 in one-time costs is what I'm looking at, and ongoing costs. I don't see the other ongoing is $458,600 and $87,000. Is that what that is?
If you're looking at 2A, it's actually on the second page.
Page 2.
Right. Yeah. So it's 1.4 million in one time, actually almost 1.5 million in one time, 728,000 in year 1, 963,000 in year 2 ongoing, but that's a blend of all funds. So the general fund impact is the line item below that. And that's where the emphasis was placed based on the prior direction. And so you can see the general fund impact.
I see, yeah.
292,000, and then you have the ongoing numbers as well. And then you have the CIP also, which is in 4A and 4B.
So out of the, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention, you know, there's more work I'm sure we can do and meeting with you and going over some of these things. If the decision is to adopt a status quo budget and push off all of the other requests, what you may see is that there are going to be some significant impacts. We need some appropriations for some CIP projects that are underway and going and that we've got contracts with, or that we've got grant funds and requirements to meet a certain deadline for performance. That what you'll find is, instead of looking at everything all at once and being able to understand the impacts on a higher level, is that staff will have to start bringing back item by item to specific council meetings to get direction and move forward on some of those. And so I'm not sure that's where you want to go. I think we can certainly spend more time. You know, we've made ourselves available before this meeting, before the last meeting, to meet with you and go over questions, and I'm certainly willing to do that some more. But this allows you to look at everything kind of on a whole, and I know it can be very overwhelming, but it gives you a better idea versus having things come up one at a time where you're making decisions without being able to see the bigger picture. And so I would just urge that we spend some time really looking at this and going over some of the impacts of it, because I think there will be some unintended, very negative impacts by just continuing a status quo budget and putting off a lot of these requests for a few months. So,
yeah, and unless we were under serious financial duress, I wouldn't foresee a situation where I'd recommend a status quo only budget for much of the reason that Roberta just articulated. It's a really inefficient way to plan your budget. You don't get that's kind of the comments that were made earlier, that's a much worse way to have a sense of the whole picture when you're doing everything as a one-off. I mentioned the strategic plan items. Often those happen that way because they're still evolving fresh off the council retreat. So in the couple of instances that were mentioned, both broadband and farmers market, We do need to put together more information, and we'll bring those back. But just as a reminder, Measure E was actually written with broadband in mind. So we do have a built-in funding source there, and the farmers market costs aren't so significant that it would be difficult to find the funding. That's sort of my take on it. We also have a lot of specialized funding that could be used for that purpose, including in the Bridge District. There's a CFD that could actually contribute to funding the farmers market. And so not so concerned about either one of those.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, I do appreciate you taking into consideration having to prepare, the capacities we've been talking about. This is just continuing the ongoing, in some of the measures, and it's different than I think the 2A is something I'm okay with. The 3A is fine as well, and the 4A, but it is in the carryover of some of what's going on in, like, say, for example, Measure E. I'd like to evaluate that a little more and, shelve that for, include that in a future decision and delayed. But I also like to be able to see how you can fold in the farmers market to some extent. I know you mentioned you could bring it in the future, but, just the planning on how that looks so that we can track it. And also some analysis of the broadband and how that would look in the implementation here, because we don't have a plan for that at all. And I just don't see how we're thinking about implementing it here in the city. So I just like to be able to see, what that looks like, or even have a conversation with you about that.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of opportunity. The budget isn't really the place for that. It's really the strategic plan. If you recall, after the strategic plan, priorities are set, staff follows up with the action plan, and with the final list plus the action plan. We were delayed on everything this year, and so that item we're actually, I was just talking about it with Amanda today. We'll be bringing it to the council either on the 16th or possibly the July 14th meeting, given that's your first potential meeting together in person. But that plan is where staff builds out the next steps on implementing the council's strategic priority. So it's not, it wouldn't be in the budget. It would be in the action agenda for the plan. There may be costs that are identified in there. And if they're not already covered in the budget, then the strategic plan is where we tell the council, here's our projection of how much it's going to cost and what types of funding would be available to do it. And the two that we keep talking about here, the farmers market and broadband, both have reliable, dedicated funding sources where I'm confident that we'll be able to advance both of those objectives while still doing everything that we're proposing to move forward tonight.
So could we do like a continuing resolution that, so it's not set on, aside from the A's here, do a continuing resolution for the remainder? Is that?
So I think if I'm following what you said prior to that, it sounded like you were supportive of moving ahead the A items. So those plus our status quo budget. I hate to use, it's sort of semantics. I hate to use the term continuing resolution. What we're recommending is carrying forward the budget that we've maintained from the last 2 years, in addition to the items that are on the A list, and then delaying everything else that's on the B list until further analysis can be done about freeing up additional general fund capacity. We said October, I think, in the report that we would bring those back then, but I think more specifically, it would be once we're able to come back to the council with that long-term budget sustainability strategy, that would precede us coming back with all of the B list items. So that's our proposal. If that tracks with kind of where you were going, then I think we're clearly on the same page there. I'd like to get away from the term continuing resolution because it has a different meaning.
If I may, Madam.
Sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, no, it to me has a totally different meaning, and that was my point. That's not what we do. Local, we can't do that. But what we have, I just want you to, what you've described, what you're asking for is, to me, it's exactly what is being proposed. That you want to question the use of funds in Measure E, Measure V, Measure K, whatever, down the line, and Measure N. Those are policy decisions because those are decisions that were made in previous councils and how that money is allocated by voters and then by us for the policy. And that's fine. I think what staff is also articulating is they want to shore up the general fund so that we don't have deficit years and we can get to our priorities. That's the exercise that's going on. So I'm not afraid of the vote as it is in December 16th, because we just got to give staff the authorization to go keep the water running, the toilets flushing, the whatever, right? Everybody, and that's what we're doing. We keep them, and I don't know what happens if we don't pass a budget. I'm afraid to ask, but either case, we could change it anytime. And I think the exercise we're saying is, then let's come back and have those discussions around all the B items here and the appropriate places to fund those items. And those, I'll be clear, there's some things I'm not going to agree with, but that's the whole point of the debate. And so, again, but I think for the purposes of where we are today is just trying to get a budget passed with as little impact to the general fund as possible without impacting city services and city staff so that we can make more deliberative, well-informed choices later. That's it, in my view.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. Councilmember Orozco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I look at this document, what I see is that it reflects where we were at the last meeting. It gives us the liberty to go back and think about how we can compensate our staff and our city employees, because that's always been voiced as one of our priorities, all four of us. It gives us the opportunity to protect the general fund so we can look into those things, but also really make those real important decisions about where it is that we want to focus our resources. We also talked about, when we talked about Learning Ladder and the future of preschool in the city, I think we all were in agreement that while we might want to exit the direct provision of early childhood education as providers, we didn't want to turn our back on the people who have dedicated decades of their lives to the children of West Sacramento. And I think our hearts all spoke when I said, we have staff out there. And if there's no other opportunity for them, because we haven't partnered with Kelsters or done any other kind of, partnership out there, like, how do we not lose these valuable assets that have dedicated themselves? And those aren't the hard decisions. Frankly, that's what, when we're talking about Measure E, I'm very guarded about Measure E. I had Aaron justify every line item, and he says, on one of them, like, what is this? Can Downtown Streets team do this cleanup instead? And we save that money and not spend it in Measure E. Well, this is bigger than Downtown Street team. We have encampments that need cleaning up, and they need special people who are trained to do more than just pick up sharps needles. We're talking about public waste and feces and things that could really make people sick. And we don't want to subject our street workers to doing that type of work without proper protection. I looked at this and of course there are things that I'm looking away. Wait, that made the B list? What are you talking about? Like, I want that back. And I just didn't see this as an absolute no. I thought it was just a hold for now. Let's get through A, and then we'll all come together as a team and make a decision about the remainder. So I see what you're talking about, because I'm all about the broadband too. I agree with that. I think we all do. And I think, we all decided that other activities, like the one proposed by Councilmember Alcala, all good ideas. I just don't see that those are no's. I think we're just saying, let's go with A's, yes, for now. And then let's go with, the second wave. And that's just so we can do so very deliberately and with consideration of all the information we have and what we can get reimbursed for and what's one time and what's ongoing and yada, yada. So I think we're closer than we think right now. I'm not hearing in the second wave of discussions that we're that far apart.
Thank you, Councilmember Roscoe. And I do just want to take into consideration, we have a new council member, Alcala. This is beyond just these decision packages, which we had a nice opportunity to go through and hear the background or read about the background. And, I'll let Councilmember Alcala know, we in our prior strategic planning retreat, these decision packages were presented to us at that time, and we had a chance to actually have more of a dialogue with the staff, but we kind of, for most of them, but not all of them. So we had a chance to, go back and forth with the staff a little bit on some of the major ones that were being considered. And we still have an opportunity while all the staff are here, which is our opportunity to ask questions and take a look at the new funding requests that are presented before us. And I also had a chance to meet with Chief Benz this last Friday. I learned a lot about, and so this letter from, 522 kind of reflects what I'm hearing is, and I received the report, the annual report, which is the increased demand for calls and just the spike of calls, the number of fires that are going on around the city, and the number of medical calls that are happening, and also the overtime that our personnel is working. Nobody talks about that, really. And there's a certain thing called mandatory overtime. And mandatory overtime is not firefighters volunteering to work overtime so they can make the extra money, because we're not really paying them enough to make ends meet. Firefighters really may just have themselves working and their spouses taking care of the family. And they have growing families. And I'm grateful that in this last negotiation, we actually decided to subsidize their health care, whereas they were out of pocket in past years subsidizing their family's health care, which I'm glad that in this last go round, we are now subsidizing the health care. So I'm thinking about how much of a pressure and stress this is putting on the families, where I think we need, we put out an engine. An engine is which carries, water, an additional water truck, and I'm beginning to see a lot of, just a lot of, Sac Fire, for example, or Davis, who are coming out. So those are called mutual aids, because I'm watching the Pulse app, to see who's coming in, because we've got a lot of brush fires going on out there. One near the train, one near the port. I saw one near Ramos Oil, company. So we have to be able to get those fires out quickly, because it'll spread with the winds and with the climate that we're having. The climate change is impacting and increasing fires, and this is only May. And I just cannot believe how many fires there are out there. Same thing with the police. And I'll say there's a lot of, requests and emails demanding more police to address, just an increase in crime. Nationwide, we're seeing more shootings happening. That's not just a trend here in West Sacramento, but a trend nationwide that we're noticing 80% increase. And also our demand for reimagining, police force, and how are we going to, we're imposing, for good reasons, training, such as implicit bias and other types of training that we are asking for a police force. And I'd like to be able to ensure that we have those trainings across the board to all of our personnel. So when I fight for, raises for personnel, it's because I'm going to be asking them to do more. I'm going to be asking them to be more service oriented, more, conscientious of how they are treating, our constituents. And that's, that's just to make sure that everybody's responsive. And I have seen a great work coming out of, all the staff doing that. As a matter of fact, it's really refreshing and nice to see how everybody has been responsive. But, we want to make sure that they are trained to do that as well. And so there's opportunities to increase training for that. But taking a look at, the demand for our public safety and our first responders and the increased calls and just the demand from our constituents to make sure that that the aid is there. And so when I took a look at the budget and I didn't see the increase, that matched the demand, I was a little concerned about that. But I also didn't see a whole lot of general fund, revenue to add in that. And so that is a concern of mine that we have that. We have other demands for our, which I'm glad Aaron is, created a facilities fund to take care of the storm drains and, to pave the roads, for the courtyard. So, and for all the cars that we have Parks and Rec, and the demand there, Department of Public Works, to be able to do abatement and cleaning, to address, and that's why we have an increase in personnel, because the demand is there. And one of the questions I asked is, while we're increasing personnel, where in those places could we ask for CalWorks participants to be considered? And so I asked to consider that in a collaborative effort with Yolo County. CalWorks participants could be hired so they can get on the job training at while they are receiving their CalWorks benefits, which includes their salary. So it'll be it's a benefit, that and it does require us to hire them. When I checked with Karen Larson, I know that I wasn't sure of that. So it is a program we can institute here in West Sacramento for some of these programs, and maybe hire some of our own families who are participants of CalWorks to get a city job where they can learn on the job, and then also be able to get paid and get their, preserve their health benefits and their child care benefits, which is another benefit. These are families that need child care. So those are all hard to find when you become an employee straight out of, just going on the job, is paying for child care and transportation or education and things like that. So those are some of the things I was thinking of. And I'm not trying to say we aren't going to approve anything when I talk about a continuing resolution. We're not cutting anything. Even Measure E, I'm saying we just want more time to think about it. And this is a year-over-year budget where I get, and I, Councilmember Alcala, have the opportunity to evaluate what it is we want to continue to fund, even if it's a past year budget. And I was thinking about the items in the A group, which I think are okay to move forward and approve, but the rest of the remainder of the budget to be a continuing resolution, where I support Councilmember Alcala's recommendation with that. But I just wanted to take it back and ask if there are any other comments. Councilmember Roscoe.
I just have one question. I'm sorry. What do you mean specifically when you say you want the items B to be subject to a continuing resolution? I just don't understand.
So the items under the A's to fund, but the remainder of the budget to be a continuing resolution doesn't mean it's not going to get funded. It does get funded, but it doesn't get permanently like we are set and that's it. It gets, it's a 2-year budget. It just gets funded temporarily so that we can take care of those, like you said, we got to pay the employees their checks and then make sure that we have these projects paid for. It doesn't require for Roberta to come back and ask us to check in to see if anything, we're not saying no to anything. It's just asking to postpone making it a 2-year budget for a future date. And I don't think it's illegal. I'm not asking for anything that's illegal here.
If I may, I'd like to make sure I understand. It sounds like you're supportive of the items that the supplemental items that we are proposing on the A attachments today. It sounds like what you are not supportive of is the status quo budgets. And so if I may, and I haven't vetted this by my city manager, but if we're not comfortable adopting a 2-year budget, could we look at doing a 1 year of the status quo and give that time with maybe a subcommittee of the council that we can work with to go through those things? So you're not committing to 2 years. I think the council has, the council's prerogative to come back and make changes to budgets even after you adopt it. And so I'm kind of hearing that there's.
I'm going to stop you because I think you're right on the last point. We have a prerogative. We could change the budget at any time. Right. That's exactly right. So I like I said, I don't know what we're doing, frankly, because everything I heard the mayor say she wants is being proposed. So we're just not calling it a continuing resolution because we don't do that. This is not something in our toolbox that we can do. The staff is holding off. And when we get more information, they'll re-propose it and we can approve it as part of another budget action in October, whenever that is. So I'm just being very candid here. This is all semantics to a degree. And what I'm hearing, I think you're right, Roberta. I think what I heard is 2 ways yeah, there's real impacts there. I'm not going to say, I was just looking at some of the things in there. I'm not going to say no to some of these things that people have asked for. Department heads who are in everyday front lines of our city saying they need to make sure they have, I know this is one near and dear to my colleague's heart, which is edible food recovery. That we have that's a $188,000 appropriation that we need to kind of continue that work, which is important given our status of COVID and kind of the needs of that program. But again, those are kind of things I trust our city manager as the executive of this organization and our city staff and department heads who have thought through these expenditures on at least the A list and even put it onto the B list that these are no impacts, then they're going to give us time to think about it. So again, I get sort of what you're saying, Roberta, but I'm not interested in. I don't think anybody's saying here we need to do a 1-year budget. I think we've got a 2-year budget in front of us with an opportunity to change it with some more analysis and more review in the fall. Let's say the fall.
And just to recap, continuing resolution, status quo budget, continuing budget, whatever we want to call it, we're proposing to carry forward the existing allocations in the prior 2-year budget. The A list items are new items, new requests that we're recommending to carry forward on June 16th. The B list we put off until we have time, Roberta and I have time, to really thoroughly go through other options for the council, policy options, to look at ways to use existing revenue differently, look at ways to augment revenues. And when we come back, we'll have that information and hopefully have you in a place where you're comfortable to take another look at that B list. We're not saying please adopt everything on the B list at that point, because we understand there may be items on there that council may have more questions about, but just want to be clear about that is staff's recommendation. And I believe it tracks with what the mayor described earlier. So that's our plan for coming back on June 16th. If there are items on that A list that individual council members have questions about, we are happy to make more time to address those, but I just want to be really clear about what we're planning to come back with on the 16th.
Thank you. I also do want to ask for a consultation between the chiefs and our director of finance to go over overtime and to take a look at making sure that all of our personnel are being paid overtime effectively and it is, accounted for. So just you can, follow up with that. That would be great.
So that's something we. Go ahead, Roberta.
Well, I was going to say I'm happy to get involved. I know HR is under the city manager's office, and they've got ways of calculating FLSA and all of the different overtime, and so we could certainly evaluate that. if needed, but I'm positive they're being paid.
Yeah, that's something we generally have built into our analysis, especially when we do the twofold one when we look at the need for positions, but also when it comes for bargaining. That's always a topic that comes into play. So yeah, that kind of analysis is sort of an ongoing thing with both from a needs perspective and from a a budget impact. But we'll continue to do that.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
In our YOLO, or tomorrow we're having our executive commission to address homelessness. And in our last meeting, we had discussed each city's, and I think it came out of my report, each city's approach to how we are going to deal with the diminishing funding with Project Roomkey. And one of the questions that was posed to each jurisdiction was, is your individual city looking to extend the program further? And if so, please voice that. And I, on behalf of what I believed our colleagues would all say, is of course, because it's always been our goal to extend that program until we can have the permanent supportive housing development open for the transition. With that stated, I know that there is a very high likelihood that if we were to make an appropriation for at least a month extension until July, that we could get a reimbursement for it. But that's one of those things that wasn't necessarily on the list, but one of those things that I think that, we would certainly want to have included here. That said, there's other contingency plans, but I think we're all on the same page based on what has been explained. And I think if we can move forward, at least with the minimum agreement that we can approve of the items in A and then come back on B, and maybe with even an amendment if we decide we want to add the extension in the meantime. I think that would be a great step in the right direction.
Yes, I think that's what the city manager said, was we're looking at item A and the extension, right?
Yeah, actually, that's sort of a late breaking thing, given the uncertainty still about the state funding. So the county has informed us that, we hope and expect that the state funding in the budget and the governor's proposal will come through. It'll allow them to extend Roomkey on a much longer term basis. But there's the risk that there's going to be this interim period between June 15th, roughly, and July, that month of rent, where the state funding may not be available yet. And the question that's been posed is would the city be interested in funding that gap period with the, again, hope and expectation that the state funding comes back to reimburse us? I've, sort of read the room here and believe their support to at least keep Roomkey going for as long as possible, ideally until our permanent supportive housing project opens. And as Councilman Orozco signaled, we've informed the county that we would be interested in funding at least that first month. But that's not in the budget right now, because that's sort of something that developed last week. So we know it's been there, but we didn't want to propose it in the budget without knowing that we need the money. So that's one area where if there is support, Roberta and I can go back and work on the final budget and include a line item. We would propose it under Measure E, one-time Measure E funds to extend Roomkey for that 1 month period. And if we needed more later, we would come back. But ideally, we would get reimbursed and replenish the Measure E funds.
If I may, Madam Mayor, just to be clear, we're discussing a budgeting item and not necessarily a policy decision on extending Roomkey. That's
right. Right. It would be adding as a line item to the budget for next meeting.
Yes.
The alternative is I come back on. There's a number of ways to do it, but yeah, there's one option would be to do it as a budget item on the 16th.
Thank you. And I think it's about 85,000. Councilmember Orozco, is that the amount?
I got a figure around 70,000.
70,000. Okay. Okay. Thank you for representing us on that. With that, I think we have our direction, and we will continue on with council calendar.
Good evening. Just a reminder that next Tuesday is the State of the City at Sutter Health Park, and that starts at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. City manager report.
Nothing more, since we already talked about the flood.
Aren't you glad I did that now? Half the audience is gone.
No other report. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. City attorney report.
I have nothing tonight.
Thank you. Staff direction from city council members. All right. Future agenda items. Request by council. Yeah, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem moves. Councilmember Roscoe seconds. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Alcala.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
And Mayor Guerrero.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.